Much for that. Members, that's in the background, nice and cosy. Everybody feeling friendly and warm this morning, from what I can gather. It's Annandale and Eskdale, the committee. We're half an hour later than normal this morning because we've had commitments earlier on. I suppose before I get to say an apologies, members, the committee, we've been live streamed, recorded. The recording will be made available on the Council's website for public listening. This morning I'd like to welcome to the Chamber Caitlin Walton, Member of Scottish Youth Parliament for for Dumfriesshire, and Lydia Elizabeth Shaw, Youth Councillor for the Annandale South Ward. Hope you both enjoy your time here this morning. It'll be an experience you'll definitely remember by the time you get to the end of it, and you'll always be welcome back. So members, so the next part, so there's a load of information that I would normally read out, but it's in regards to team, how would Teams, Microsoft Teams, how we would conduct ourselves, but I'm not going to go through that because we all know it off by heart now. So next thing I said, apologies, members of remote participation, I'll approve that now with immediate effect. But over to yourself, I think it is, Tracy.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. We've got 9 members present in total, 7 members present in person here at Annandale Town Hall, being the Chair, Councillor Drybra, Councillor Jamieson, Councillor Thompson, Councillor Wilson, Lydia Elizabeth Shaw and Caitlin Walton. And we've got 2 members present on Microsoft Teams, being Councillor Brodie and Councillor Marshall. I've got 3 apologies from Councillors Cancrothers, Councillor Davis and Councillor McGregor, and 1 member, Councillor Mayle's now joined. So that's everybody in. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that. Item number 2 is declaration of interest and statement of connection. Do any members have any declarations of interest, statements of connections? Just for the avoidance of doubt, statement of connection for transparency reasons, members may wish to make a public statement. Declaration of interest, members are aware of that. Councillor Jamieson, George?
Yeah, I'll leave the room for item 5, I think it is, on the borderlands. I've got a relative that's directly involved, so I'll leave the room for that.
Thank you, thanks very much. Councillor Drybra, Archie?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I've got the same statement of connection, but I'm not going to leave the room because it's more about what the ongoing process actually is.
Item 5, that was Archie, was it? Yep, item 5 as well. Thank you. Thanks very much for that. I'll just double check online. Don't see any hands coming up. Looking at Councillor Mayle, Marshall and Brodie in particular. I didn't see nothing coming up. Nobody else in the room. Thanks very much, members. Minute of the previous meeting, item number 3, which is of the 25th of September. Members, yep, not getting any dissenting voices in regards to approval. Don't need a mover or a seconder for that. If that's agreed, thank you. Thanks very much. Item number 4, members, with the speed. The main event, members, Education Skills, Community Wellbeing Directorate. This is end of year assessment. Sorry. So the first report we are being asked to consider today is the end of year performance report from the Education Skills and Community Wellbeing Directorate in relation to the performance in Annandale and Eskdale. This is a very detailed report offering a great deal of information specific to our area. It is good to see in the appendices that performance figures are set against those for the rest of Dumfries and Galloway and Scottish averages. This offers a clear comparative picture for members and the public. I'm particularly encouraged to read about the HMIE inspections mentioned in the strengths in 2 of our primary schools, Lochmaven Primary School and Lochby Primary School, and at 3 of the nurseries, Gretna, Hodham and Newington. All 5 reports are positive and recognise the work of staff, pupils, parents and the wider communities. I would like to welcome to the meeting Tara Woods, Head Teacher from Moffat Academy, who is joined by Alison Chambers and Karen Bryden in the hall to answer any members' questions and to address any members' comments. A warm welcome to Tara and thank you for taking your time to attend this committee. I'm sure members will appreciate that you can answer generic questions. There are sensitivities around questions or comments identifying specific schools or individuals. But before I open up to members' questions, I would appreciate if you could get some further context around the school exclusion rates within Annandale and Eskdale, which is of concern. Whoever can. Brilliant, Karen. Thank you very much. Cheers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, the further detail around the exclusions. So in our primary schools in Annandale and Eskdale, there were 44 exclusions, and that covered 33 pupils out of 2,538 pupils across 11 schools, and 10 pupils had more than one exclusion. In our secondaries, in Annandale and Eskdale, there were 55 exclusions, and that was 42 pupils out of 2,242 across 4 schools, and 11 pupils had more than one exclusion. And I'm delighted to commend this morning that no looked after pupils were excluded in this period, and there are 57 looked after pupils currently in Annandale and Eskdale.
Thanks so much for that. I know one member that is sitting ready poised. Oh, Joanne Scott. Joanne? Sorry. Oh, it's Sean, is it? Sorry, it's the... I thought it was in. So, Councillor Marshall, then Councillor Jimison after that. Sean?
Yeah, it's really just a suggestion, Chair. It's maybe something you've considered, but there's a lot in this report, and it would probably be easier if we could maybe go through it recommendation by recommendation, because there's the detail in 4.3 to 4.9, but then there's also 3 appendices, and I think it would probably be better if we debated each one of those separately, because there's quite a lot in this report. It's just maybe just it's a suggestion on the way forward and how we do the business on this report.
Thanks very much for that, Sean. We'll consider that as we go forward. So, allow Councillor Jimison. George, you want to come in?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Not surprised, I have a few questions, but I'll stick to try and keep it compartmentalised. So the first thing I'll touch on, I think we'll touch on exclusions later in the performance thing. First thing I would like to say is on the inspections, it's really good news, because I know these schools, particularly Lockerbie one, there's a lot of challenges. So I'd just like to say great work from the head teacher and the staff, because I know it's been a stressful time for them. So it's good to see that. The more awkward question is, and this is good, I'm going to be called Mr. Candor, because these are good stories, and we talk about the strengths. But there may be no weaknesses, but it'd be really good for us to know where the challenges are, as well as successes and things like that. You know, it's up to the politicians to put all the rosy stuff out. What I would really like to see is where, as a council, we can help build on the successes and manage the weaknesses. And quite often, and it's maybe just me with my cup half full, we get a lot of stuff about the successes, and we really need to know about them and build on them, but we need to look at the weaknesses. If Scotland's line-out had been good last week, we could have won by 50 points. So it's just getting a little bit more candour. I'll try not to use that word ever again.
Thank you, Councillor Jimison. And as I was asked a similar question at one of the other area committees, and by the very format of the template of the report, this comes under the heading of key successes. So obviously that's where we share them. And you're quite correct. Every school has areas for improvement, and we have moved that you should all have received copies of these inspection reports as they are published. And in those inspection reports, it does detail the areas for development for our schools as well. So we absolutely acknowledge that while our schools have many strengths and successes, there are areas for development, and as a team, we are supporting the schools to work on those areas, and as I'm saying, they are there for you to see.
Just a quick follow-up, if I may. Not everybody's as zoned in on education as the people in the committee or zealots like me, so it might be handy if there was a paragraph within these reports just to draw our attention, and maybe the folk that aren't on education committees, just to draw our attention to where these reports can be found, if that's not too big a hassle.
I can certainly consider that and see if they can be included in the reports.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. So, Giles, we'll take it then. Go back to Councillor Marshall's suggestion. It's the way I was kind of intending to do it anyway, Sean. I don't think there's anybody else got any particular points at this moment in time, is there? There's nobody in the room, don't see anybody online. So what Sean asked us to do is look at 2.1, consider the quality and curriculum area-based successes and developments as detailed in the detail and analysis section of this report under paragraph 4.3, 4.9. So, Sean, are you wanting to, I'll go through it, each recommendation as we go forward. Are you wanting to speak to that one at all? Because you suggested that.
No, not on that one. I have on other sections of the report or other recommendations, and not on that one, Chair.
Thanks very much. I just thought I'd give you the first option. Any other members got any points in regards to the... Yep, Councillor Jimison. George?
This is one we've asked an education committee. It's to do with positive destinations, and the target set is to reduce, sorry, not positive destinations. The target on positive destinations is well met. What a number of members would like to see is the sustainability and the quality of the positive destinations. And one of the themes that we have within the council is young people and adults succeed in what they want to achieve. And this is what I would like to dig into. You know, I'm being flippant here, but just because somebody's ended up working on zero-hour contracts, that's a positive destination. Or somebody from a low socioeconomic background that's maybe hasn't been too successful in primary school, but then with a bit of nurturing, they actually show the potential to achieve and maybe go to higher education or whatever. So it's how do we quantify positive destinations, and how do you as a team impact on the aspirations so that that individual child, young person, actually knows what he could achieve, not just what he feels he wants to achieve. So it's setting these, helping support children and young people to aspire to something that they might not think they're capable of, if you see what I mean. So it's more granular information, positive destinations. I know Jim Brown, the director, assistant director, has given a commitment that he'll do that. I just wonder if there's progress on that.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Jameson, and I know that you're passionate about positive destinations and where young people end up going. I know nothing about rugby, so I can't give you an analogy on that. However, what I would say is that our line-up is good in terms of, so there we go. Our line-out is good in terms of employability coordination groups that happen within every secondary school. We also have career management skills within our primary schools, so therefore we're constantly looking at what are the options out there. That's tied into labour market intelligence, so we're not just trying to pluck jobs that traditionally perhaps were the jobs that were always the jobs. We're looking at what is the potential labour market going to look like in the future, and we work in partnership with our colleagues at SDS, as well as our colleagues within employability and skills partnership within the council, to ensure that not only are we delivering for young people at the end of their schooling, but equally we're delivering for our young people throughout their schooling, to give them that flavour of what is out there, what's the potential, and then giving them that support, whether that's through group support through SDS, who work with S1s and S2s, or whether that's more targeted support, working with our young people at most risk of not going into a successful positive destination. So there's a lot of work going on at the moment in terms of how we're trying to assure that it's not just they have moved to college, or they have moved into university, or they have moved to a job. It's about, is that the right destination? But also within our employability and skills partnership, it's not about just when they leave school that then we stop working with them. There's lots of pipeline opportunities for young people who are perhaps not ready for schools, and that is a commitment across the council.
And just a quick follow-up. At the moment, we've only got this positive destinations very broadly with a target of 90-odd%. Can in future that be a little bit more detailed? I know that'll take time, but if we can be assured that the young people in the Priest and Galloway, Annandale and Eskdale are actually reaching positive destinations that do meet their aspirations, it would be helpful to get a little bit more granular information. It's a horrible expression, but you know what I mean.
No, I think you're right to ask the question. I need to go back, because as you know, the timing of these reports, perhaps it's about you want it in a timely fashion, and by the time that information is gathered, it's not gathered until September, October time. So we can consider it and then come back to say what would be a timely fashion to get that more detailed, granular information.
Thank you.
No, thanks very much. It will be interesting to see that information coming back. Does I suppose wider society's aspirations for young people meet their actual personal needs themselves? Is it aligned? Councillor Driver brought up a point earlier on in regards to health and social care partnership. So we were in a health social care partnership workshop environment, and it was about how do the retained staff get staff, and you just touched on that in particular. I wonder what your involvement is there in regards to, you've spoken about SDS, Employment Skills Partnership, but the Health Social Care Partnership, is there any involvement there?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Carruthers. There is partnership. We have what's called the NHS Academy. So the NHS Academy works across 6 areas across Scotland, and we are working with them in Priest and Galloway to look at aligning skills and aligning what we can do in schools to make those connections with NHS. So we have an NHS week on an annual basis that's organised by the NHS, and we have job opportunities that young people can do, not just to be doctors and nurses, but that's from bloods, from working in the canteens, from being a plumber. So there's a wide range of jobs that we recognise within NHS that we are now working with NHS through their academy to try and give young people that opportunity across the board. So that's one of the positive parts of partnership working. We also work with the college in terms of that healthcare, social care, and making sure there's pathways into that learning side as well.
Thanks very much for that. I was aware of the NHS week, I wasn't aware of your involvement, so that's good to hear. Absolutely excellent. Members, I'll just double check. Anybody else? Councillor Thompson, Stephen?
So is this any questions on the report in front of us for item 4? Or
Stephen, I'll be absolutely, you can if you want. We're on 2.1 in particular, around the quality and curriculum, but if you want to ask any question at any point, feel free to come in, because I ultimately want to get the best out of this committee and the questions that people have got. So it could even the back of a question or something late further on, we'll just address it at that point. Stephen?
Yeah, so I think I'm more sort of focused on I suppose the outcomes, which is usually the performance, I guess. So in terms of literacy and numeracy, this is one that comes up regularly, and it's sitting at, it's reporting in the papers NAT 5 as sort of 63% as opposed to a target of 68%, I think it is, in terms of that level of achievement, if you like. So this kind of ties into other things as well, because obviously we're looking at number of exclusions, and then PEF, so part of the attainment challenge will be around that kind of funding, which is to support people who maybe would have more difficulty reaching the same level of attainment, and then how much impact that's had. But what we're seeing seems to be there's been a drop-off since 2020, let's say, from a sort of certain bar, and then that's dropped off, and then we're getting figures that it's never really climbed quite back to that sort of post-COVID, if you like, if that's the sort of marker. So I suppose what I'm asking is, how effective are, for example, the PEF measures? And I see in some of the reports it does have a kind of adopt, adapt or abandon type approach to certain initiatives, which is quite helpful, because I think we're really concerned about what impact are the activities having, what's leading to an improvement, but at the moment it's really hard to discern, because the performance is fairly stable and maybe not still below target, what's actually making a difference? Do you know, and rather than being enumerative, saying, oh, well, 250 pupils have visited this support place, what difference has that made? You know, it's like, you can turn up, but if it's not, it made no difference to the impact, then is it like adopt, adapt or abandon? You know, it's like, I think that's kind of where I'm trying to get to in terms of, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. I think that I was going to take the three of us to answer this question. So if I start with one part and then perhaps hand over to my colleagues. So when we look at our national qualifications data, it's very much based on 5 at National 5, 5 at National 6. And what we would recognise is that that method, that way of measuring us, is only one measure. And so I'm not saying that the percentages are not where they should be, but I'm saying that's just one measure. What I would say is that we have a number of courses now across all of our schools, in particular Annandale and Eskdale, that are not necessarily a National 5 or a higher, but are a Level 5 or a Level 6 course, which is equivalent. So I would say that the breadth of course choices isn't always reflected in the raw data of our national qualifications. But I would also say in terms of when we look at that, our gradings, the 5 at 5 and 5 at 6, we have to recognise that we've not had that parity of number of subjects young people could be offered across our schools. And so therefore, if you're only sitting, the boring part, if you want, if you're only sitting 5 National 5s in S4, it's very hard to then change them into 5 hires at S6. Whereas if you're doing 7 National 5s, you've then got, you can pick your base 5 to go forward to higher. So there's part of that that's part of the rationale and the reasoning for why our grades are where we are, but we absolutely recognise, and you're correct to say, there has been a drop since 2020. We know that's a national picture, but we have work to do in terms of how we then enhance our qualifications if this is a measure we're going to be measured by. In terms of PEF spend is predominantly for In secondaries, S1 to S3, so it's about putting those building blocks in place, so to then give them that catalyst for S4, S5, S6, we were then measured against the national 5s and national 6s. I want to hand perhaps over to Karen, who'll give you the broad PEF sort of overview, and then I would invite Tara to then give you some perhaps examples locally of PEF spend and how that works to target some of our young people, if that's suitable.
Perfect, and apologies for the sort of meandering of the question, but the other thing just on that, so one of the things that's come up, and it's just because we've got youth representatives here as well, because one of the things that's been consistent in the youth council meetings has been about the likes of part of the curriculum that involves, I suppose, life skills and personal social education, which anecdotally, it's seen to be just, well, it's a bit of a joke class, you'll get a video or they'll just sort of bang on about not smoking or something like that, but you're not really getting taught anything programmatically, it would seem, that's actually going to assist. And the request from the Youth Council has always been, over the last times we've been attending it, is can we not have something more structured that gives you life skills, how to get on with, you know, civic training, you know, whatever it might be, in terms of like making more use of that class. And I don't know if the youth representatives have their own views of what PSE was like when they were at school, or and maybe they were very fortunate, it was really useful, but it just seemed to be a space in the curriculum that maybe wasn't getting as much out of it as it could have. And I don't know if that Tara maybe has a different approach to that for Moffat Academy. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you for your question again. And without alluding too far into what's going to happen, we certainly have been talking very recently about PSE and the school week as such, and so therefore we are looking at what do we deliver within our schools. But I'm sure Mrs Woods and Karen can give you some more information about what happens within a school.
I'll just pick up on that last point before I go back to the other PEF ones. So just to give you an example, there's been work right across the council looking at preventing homelessness and supporting our young people as they leave school and going into either employment or to support them to become tenants, etc. So there is a course, there's a module of work that has been created in partnership across the council to support youngsters in identifying accommodation, how to budget for accommodation and things like that. So that's just to give you sort of quite a live and current example of a PSE offering right across our secondary schools that has been developed within the council by council staff in a number of departments. Looking at the PEF, as you say, you know, you pick up quite correctly, there are a number of PEF initiatives that, whilst we can measure them through their attendance, and one of the examples I'll give you a participation is breakfast clubs. Now, we cannot tell you exactly and measure exactly that by giving children breakfast that their attainment is better than it would have been had we not given them breakfast. But, you know, you look at research and it says that if, you know, children and young people are coming into school fed, you know, ready for the school day. And that's what makes it difficult with some of the PEF measures, is that schools are very much looking to close the poverty-related attainment gap, and because that is the function of PEF, but some of these items are difficult to measure and to show that exact impact. You know, for example, participation, you know, perhaps some overseas trips and things, schools use the funding for that. So it's to ensure that these pupils are having a widest range of opportunities. And again, it's very difficult to measure in exact sort of quantities, you know, has that had an impact on their attainment? And I'll hand over now perhaps to Mrs Woods, who might want to talk about some of the initiatives within schools.
Thanks, Stephen. So for us, PEF is, we have a fairly limited pot because it is based on your school role. And as a head teacher, I'm always asking two questions when staff come to access PEF funding, and it's how can we make things different or better for young people? You know, if we move ahead with the project, what is the so what? How is this going to look to families? We have a project planning system in place in Dumfries and Galloway. where anybody spending PEF funding has to put in a really clear plan showing how many young people it's going to impact and what the difference is that we're looking for, along with ongoing evaluation of the success of those projects. And head teachers are confident to talk to staff about changing a plan if we are not seeing that intended impact during the course of the project. You know, it's not good enough to, at the end of a project, say, well, that didn't have the intended impact. You've got to be quite dynamic and flexible with it. So for us in our cluster, there are two main aspects that we look at, if I'm going to simplify it. The first one is practical supports for families. So what are the barriers and limitations that are preventing families and young people from getting involved in all that Moffat Academy and the cluster schools have got to offer, and how can we remove those barriers in a confidential and dignified way? So examples that we have in our cluster are we operate a full food bank with fortnightly deliveries. We use supplementary donations from Cash for Kids and from the community to help us with that. We have a uniform bank, but not only uniform, it is other clothing which would enable young people to get involved in extracurricular like sporting kind of clothing, bike clothing, to be involved in bike club. And it is so confidential that there is one member of staff that works with certain families that have been identified using a range of different data, and only that member of staff knows who the families are, so that there is no broader knowledge across the school, so everybody looks and is treated the same to any external sort of lens. The other side of this is the teaching and learning and academic side, and our aim there is to close the gap and raise attainment for those who would be at risk of missing out. So we use PEF in a range of creative ways. There are a lot of interventions which Dumfries and Galloway make available, such as closing the numeracy gap, which can address aspects of numeracy. We can do small group work where young people are extracted and work in a targeted way. We can also do one-to-one, and we also have in-class support. The other really important side of this is upskilling our teachers through a really strong career-long professional learning opportunities which we have access to, so that our teachers are skilled in differentiation, enabling young people to access the curriculum at a level which is appropriate to them, and also raising attainment for what we're looking for. A big thing with PEF spend is giving families who need that support the confidence to come to the school. So it's about having really accessible leadership in the school, an open door policy, and families that feel that they can share often quite sensitive needs with us, knowing that that will be addressed. The other thing is we are an all through 2 to 18. We really target a lot of work, especially around family partnerships in our early years, and our nursery provider. And just picking up on the tutor time question, we have daily tutor time, which is classed as a subject and is subject to our usual quality assurance, self-evaluation for self-improvement activities. So we've recently had a personal and social education focus week where all teachers who deliver PSE had a formal classroom observation with data gathered looking at areas of strength and areas for improvement, as we would for any subject. So if I was a biology teacher, you know, we treat it with the same rigour, and that is led by our deputy head who is in charge of GERFIC.
I don't want to sort of hog this, but just in terms of that rigour that you're speaking about, so it's, and again it's anecdotal, but often it's maybe like, oh, a PE teacher will take the PSE class, or, you know, that kind of, it's PE and PSE seem to be the first to go whenever it's, you know, if there's a sort of pressure on the teaching resource or whatever. It seems to be that, well, actually they're not given the same weight, if you like. It would seem historically, and I take what you're saying, it's like, well, actually now you're supporting this rigour in terms of like, it's a proper curriculum, there's valuable skills that can be learned from this, I'm just sort of wondering, is that consistent, given that we're moving towards that kind of consistency of curriculum across the region? How does that get programmed in terms of, that's great for Moffat Academy, but what about for Annan or Lochaber Dumfries, wherever you go? So it's like, is there going to be that same level of consistency and rigour about all the subjects to maximise the use of things that are, because I get the non-curriculum, so if it's qualifications, it's not the only story, because you can have a positive destination without that, but sometimes the civic or social skills that you can get, if they're firmly embedded, can actually then give you a better foundation for sort of, well, okay, it might not be academic, but I've actually got this strength to take forward into real life, as it were. So how does that get made consistent across the curriculum? Sorry, and then that's me, thank you. Right.
No, thank you, Councillor Thompson. And I suppose my answer at this moment in time is that there was an Education and Skills, Community Skills Committee decision on the 8th of November, and officers gave commitment at that point that we will work with our head teachers to ensure that we have the widest possible curriculum offer across all of our schools, and that's exactly what we're doing. That's what we're working towards, and that will include what is our core offer, as well as what are the subjects going to be offered across all of our schools.
Caitlin and Lydia. Just because you're talking about life skills, social skills, if you've got any comments to that, just put your hand up, make sure that you catch my eye. You'll be more than welcome. See you're taking notes and such like. So I think if you've not got anything at this moment in time, Councillor Marshall, Sean, you're next, I think.
Yeah, Chair, I'll come in then. It's regarding within the report, it's probably my major concern, maybe major concern in most of the councillors. It's in Appendix 2, which is the attainment summary, and it's in particular the teacher judgment survey of achievement of a level at P1, P4, P7 and S3s on page 27. If you look at the four tables, Annandale and Eskdale is not only below the Scottish average, and in some cases well below the Scottish average, but also, apart from about 1 or 2, it's below the D&G standard as well across all of those 4 age groups. I think the only one where we're above the D&G is in P1 numeracy, but we're still well below the Scottish average. And if you look at, I think there's one where I think it's in S3 and on writing, Annandale and Eskdale is 79.8 compared to a Scottish average of 98.2. So these are worrying trends. I may be wrong, but historically in the past, Annandale and Eskdale held its own or performed well against when it was compared against D&G. And I know these are teacher judgment surveys, so I maybe want just a little bit of clarity on whether or not that the teacher judgment survey is consistent across Scotland and across D&G, and if it is, what are we doing to address this in Annandale and Eskdale right across the board?
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Again, it'll be a sort of two-pronged approach. I'll start off and then hand over to my colleague Karen, who will give you a bit more information. You're absolutely right. It is teacher judgment, and teacher judgment means that there's always going to be that variability within judgment, and so therefore it's important, incumbent upon the local authority to have that moderation process and to understand that moderation to ensure that we are getting that consistent approach. I would say that we're now working much closer with our schools to look at that moderation, to look at what is the data that they're producing. In the past, we had what was called 2 uplifts a year, where we looked at what did the data look like in February before we then had to submit our data for June. We recognise that was for P1, P4, P7 and S3, but as an authority we've now recognised that that's not enough data, it's not given us that information in a timely fashion, so we now have 3 uplifts a year, so we have a November uplift, February and then of course our June, and we're now looking at that data for nursery all the way through to S3, and that's to allow us to have that broader picture to see where are our gaps, where do we need to be putting more resource into to ensure that we can actually understand what our data is telling us and then how we then improve that data. I would also note that you're absolutely correct to say that we are below Scottish average. We are not an average authority, and so therefore we do sit within family group 4, but I do recognise that there is work still to be done. But I would give you assurances that we are working with our head teacher colleagues. They understand their data, they know where their data sits, and we are working to ensure that the data is improving, but improving through pedagogy and teaching and learning, and not just improving the data to make us look as if our data is improving. We're trying to look at what is the root cause of that, of the results, and then trying to ensure that we do have that correct teacher judgment in place, and then we have the correct data, and we can then manage those trends and look at where are there issues that we have to then put more resource into.
Alison's stolen quite a bit of what I was going to say there, so that's fine. So the only thing I would add on to that is when you look forward and see these young people, their outcomes at senior phase are higher than sort of it is projected in these outcomes for them in primary school. So it is very much that individual teacher judgment. There is not a test. It's not, if a child does X, Y and Z, tick, that's the level achieved. Teachers are asked to draw on a range of assessments and information about pupils, and that varies from teacher to teacher, within schools and across our schools. So again, it's about having that understanding within our schools. What does a curriculum for excellence level look like for our schools in Dumfries and Galloway?
Thank you. Sean, give you a chance to come back.
Yeah, just to come back, but obviously, you know, the information before you has actually led to potential interventions by Education Department, but also as well, do we have any, this is for 2023, do we have any comparative years before that? And if so, are we seeing a downward trend?
We do have comparator data, and the other thing I'll add is that in less than 2 weeks, the 2024 data will be published. So that will give us our data from June 2024, and we will. So you'll have the 5-year data there as well as the national comparators there.
Yeah, and just quickly, Chair, if you allow me, so if you're getting that information in the next couple of weeks, will we not see that till next year, or will it be possible to see before that, you know, what the latest results are?
You're correct. As the governance structure works around committees, so that data will be reported to Education, Skills and Community Wellbeing at the end of this council year, and then after that point, that data will then be reported to area committees after that. So it's probably around September time, I think, at the earliest, that data will be reported to area committee.
You fine with that, Sean?
I would like to see it sooner, but if that's the case, you know, if we've got to wait nearly 9 months for that information.
I suppose one of the things I want members to kind of think about as well, so it's you've kind of touched on it, Sean, so 2.1 through to 2.4 is quite a clear structure there. So it's asking us to scrutinise, review, so on and so forth, but there's no real decision making there from what I can see. And that's some, so is there a potential 2.5? And if that is, what is that 2.5 as in regards to the decision? Or is it something we need to discuss in item number 6, I think it is. Maybe it's item number 6 we need to discuss it. You want to come in?
Just to say, I think that's what has happened in the previous area committees we've been to over the last month, because again, similar themes have emerged around the data and the timing of it and the role of area committee.
Excellent, no, spot on. And so we'll discuss that at potential 2.5, or we'll discuss that in item number 6 for future reports coming forward. I'll take you as a first-time speaker, Councillor Ryber, and then Jimison after that. Archie?
Okay, thanks very much. Thanks very much for your report, large as it is. Now I go to Appendix 1, if I can, on page 22, and it talks about the percentage of pupils gaining 5+ awards at level 5, and I'm presuming that's from the education schools as opposed to external agencies such as, you know, Duke of Edinburgh's cadets, things like that, because cadet forces are now working with SQA on getting levels up and above. So I'm asking the question, is that taken into consideration when you talk about the percentage of, you know, pupils that get award levels 4 to 5? I mean, we've got a youth team here as well, who I know in the Ecclefechan, for instance, work hard with the cadet forces and Poppy Scotland, all of that sort of stuff. Personal issues with that, like, you know, but not bad ones, good ones. I really like it. So I'm just wondering if there's external organisations get put into these stats, because I think it would improve them if you were made aware of them.
No, thank you for your question, Councillor Driver. And I think you're absolutely right. It's about what we can report and what we're asked to report on, and then what data we have sitting behind all what we're measured on. So you're correct. There is a number of courses, and you mentioned cadets as one of the level 4, level 5 courses, and I think it's uniformed organisations is a course that you're mentioning. And there's lots of examples across, not just Annandale, Eskdale. And again, that comes back to perhaps your item 6 of what do you want these Annandale and Eskdale committees to look like, and then we certainly have the data. But what we have to really be mindful of is we can't then put data out there that might identify young people, so we have to get it in a format. But what I would encourage you is that you can have links with your schools. Schools have that data, have the conversations with your schools to really understand that, using Councillor Jimison's words, that granular information that absolutely schools carry. But when it's such a raw measure, when it's quite an abrupt measure in terms of 5 at 5 and 5 at 6, it's not giving that detail that I think many of you are looking for now.
Thanks very much for that. Councillor Jimison, George.
Yeah, Sean's asked some of the questions that we asked in terms of the broad and general education. But just on touching on that, I presume the guidance across Dumfries and Galloway and how to assess children at these levels is similar, which would indicate that Annandale and Eskdale are below the average, or would it be an indication that they are being harsher, if you like, or
I think I would refer back to its teachers' judgments, and it's very hard when you are asking teachers to make judgments whether or not you can compare one to another, and that's where the moderation process comes in. So I think instead of is one set of teachers being more harsh and more strict, I think it's about, do we understand what does the achievement level look like, and if it was compared to anyone else across Dumfries and Galloway, is that similar? So therefore the moderation process is a vital part to that teacher judgment, as opposed to whether or not we've got, as we would say in SQA, harsh markers or lenient markers.
So that was a wee additional. I'll move on to page 28 when we were looking at the SQA in the senior phase. You're quite correct that there's a national comparison and there's what they call a family of schools or local authorities which are gauged to be similar in output. Well, we're not very good. I'm going to be harsh here. Even in that league table with the local authority benchmarking framework, and they don't just use SQA qualifications. There's an index of issues that schools are rated on. And sad to say, Dumfries and Galloway, even at national level and in the local family level, there's 8 in that family, and we're 7th and 8th in most of these things. And I know that I'm banging on about this for a long time, but it's not to be critical, because I've no inference on the ability of our schools or our teachers. But what I would really like to look into is that why, even in the family, are we down the list on these indexes, index of outcomes, which covers qualifications, satisfaction, literacy, numeracy, all these things. Is there something specific to Dumfries and Galloway that's causing us to be very low down national league tables and with our direct comparators? So it's actually finding, is there something specific to Dumfries and Galloway? If not, what can we as a council do about it? The other thing that strikes me when you look at these figures and the SQA figures and outcomes is the huge variance between the 16 secondaries. There's some secondaries achieving a lot more in terms of outcomes, academic outcomes, I have to say specifically, but there's huge variance. Is that just socioeconomic? What factors are involved in that? If it is socioeconomic, and we can drift on to the PEF stuff, PEF is based on free school meals. Is that a good enough guidance to say, like pupil-teacher ratios? Should the schools that are underachieving academically have a lower pupil-teacher ratio? What can we do to close the gap between our schools and to increase our standing with comparators? I'll leave that at that. After other folk have had a go, I'd like to look at PEF again at one particular situation that feeds into that. But that's a hard question to answer, and it's huge. But what can we do as a council to raise our outcomes? Or is there a reason for them to be where they are?
I'll just say before you answer that, so we haven't got any other folk coming in for questions yet. I'll give you the chance again just in case. But so George, just keep going with your questions, but with yourself first.
Thank you, Councillor Crothers, and thank you, Councillor Jameson. There was a lot in that question. It was quite a meaty question. And I think I would start with there is no silver bullet. There is not one way of resolving where we are in our LGBF sort of indicators. I would also say that you mentioned a couple of socioeconomic factors or variables, and there are a number of variables that for one group that is the variable and for others it's not. So I don't think it cannot be defined as there is one specific thing that if we change this then it will have an impact on that. What I would give you reassurance to councillors is that we do have frameworks. We have the framework for inclusion and we have the framework for improvement, and we are on a journey with them. They've been in place now for only 2 years, and we are starting to see some impact of both the frameworks, and with that work continuing. So therefore I would hope that there would be a change in our data. I'm not going to say that it means we'll not be where we are within LGBF, and that's because if every other authority is doing work as well, then it doesn't mean that we're going to change that overnight. I think there's also that clarity of understanding of our data. So there's been a lot more work alongside our head teachers this year, understanding where we are with our data, because quite often when you're in that operational mode, when you're in your school, you're looking at your own school, and it's about lifting our heads, because when we look at the data that we present to yourselves, it's not about a school, it's about Dumfries and Galloway as a whole. So it's about that understanding and those conversations around how do we all feed into the picture of Dumfries and Galloway to improve that picture. So I think it's about understanding our data and then challenging each other in our data to say, well, why is it that school A is there, school B is there, and yet when you compare a number of the socio-economic factors, they're very similar. So it's how do you, where is our benchmark? We should have a benchmark locally, we should have a partner school which is our benchmark, and then having that challenge. But you can only do that through understanding our own data, understanding our own context, thinking about all of those variables, and then using both those frameworks for inclusion and improvement to then have that fruitful discussion to then enhance where we are. So I would call it strategic patience. We do have a strategy. Officers are confident in the strategy we have in place. However, we can't change these results overnight, because we want to ensure that it comes back to the improvement frameworks as well as pedagogy, and working with the head teachers of our schools to ensure that we are in the right journey. But as I would ask, strategic patience to ensure that we can get to where we know we have to get to, and we are driving to get there.
What we're saying, we haven't got anybody else keen to come in at the moment. You said you had further stuff in regards to probably. Just keep going, George.
Well, I don't want to hog this, but on PEF, Councillor Thompson had highlighted a few things that are positive, and it's a very difficult thing to quantify in the short term. But I'm referring to the Annan Academy project. Annan Academy, what I think, I'm unbiased because I've spoken to the head teacher about this, but they've got a PEF project that ticks a lot of the boxes. I was involved in parent councils when the PEF came out, and it was meant to be collaborative, interconnected, and it looks like Annan has tried to do that. They've lent heavily on ASN teacher support, teachers working with them, and they've set up a learning zone within the school where pupils can get an extra helping hand, guided by the assistant support teacher and the learning assistant. So they've got a dedicated zone that's improved attendance, as you say, and that in time will improve outcomes. The most telling thing from the report from Annan Academy was, and one of the very hard questions is, are you making change or something of that description? He says, not yet. And what do you need? More resources. So my question really is, can we use that project at Annan Academy to demonstrate it as maybe as a bit of a pilot to see how we can interconnect and get the maximum out of PEF? But beyond PEF, and some of the PEF money has gone to ASN, which might just be covering with the shortage in the ESN. But besides that, if PEF not there, and PEF's limited, how can we build on the successes that PEF has demonstrated can be achieved?
Thank you, Councillor Jimson. I'll answer your first question, and thank you for highlighting the work of Annan Academy through their PEF funding. And actually, Annan Academy were one of I think it was half a dozen schools that we put forward as examples of their PEF work nationally, and they were part of the PEF sampling programme, and the work that was undertaken in Annan Academy was acknowledged. So thank you for acknowledging that. And part of the work that we are doing, again, as Alison said, through sharing, and it's not just data regarding attainment that we're encouraging more sharing of in between our schools, it's actually spotlighting the work that is taking place through different types of projects, whether it be PEF or any other school improvement project, because our team are out in our schools, we're seeing this work in the real and in the flesh as it's happening, and then signposting other schools. And again, there was an event yesterday, a national event, where again we targeted schools that perhaps we felt could make better use of some of their PEF funding to participate and to spotlight some of the national practice as well. PEF funding, although it is allocated to schools based on free school meal entitlement, we are also guided, and schools are guided to use this to support families that come under the 6 family groupings as well, perhaps where there would be barriers potentially to pupils' learning and progress as well. So it is about looking at how schools are using that money to make the biggest impact for the biggest group of children and young people within our schools. And I do think, yes, we're all waiting to see what will happen going forward in 2026. We know that that's when PEF, CEF and all the Scottish Attainment Challenge funding will end, but we're not sure what that's going to look like going forward.
Well, thanks very much. That's you, George. Yep, excellent. I'll just double check in the room. I'll check online. Councillor Stephen Thomas has wanted a wee in. Go on, Stephen.
So this is a more specific question. It's just on the PEF one, but it was to do with, I think it was Lochmaben, where one of the PEF projects was to get some iPads. So I don't know if you're aware of the report, but it's talking about so part of the school day is sometimes going from Lochmaben to Lockerbie, and the iPads, basically the iPads were used to keep pupils calm during the journey, basically from Lochmaben to Lockerbie. So, but I'm not sure what impact that has on. I'm not, I mean, a lot of parents would use that technique. Maybe that's where the idea came from. Who knows? But it used to be sugar and sweets when I was young. But I don't know if that's the modern equivalent. Do you know what I mean? So I'm not sure. To me, that's just describing here's what we did. But I don't really know what what the impact of that is, other than that kept some pupils calm or occupied for a short journey between Lockerbie and Lochmaben. Do you know what I mean? So I'm sort of wondering what's the rigour around this? Because
I think what I'll say to you, Councillor Thompson, is a number of our schools have perhaps what's known as a soft start as well, which is perhaps not sugar and sweets, but it gives the children and young people perhaps 10, 15 minutes in the morning, because we have to acknowledge that for some of our young children coming into school, they are not coming in from perhaps a calm, routine morning, I think is the way of putting it. Some of our children are coming into school with an experience that has happened either in the home or something that's perhaps happened on the journey. They are living perhaps in circumstances that perhaps do not have the same sort of routine and calmness that we would feel that would set young people up to have a good day in school. So very often schools have sort of a soft start of 10 to 15 minutes where there are types of activities as have been described as being used with those iPads in the taxis, just to perhaps give the children and young people something to focus on, a bit of downtime, so that they're in the right frame of mind to come into a classroom and approach the school day for learning in the correct frame of mind, and therefore that would have that positive impact on their achievement and their attainment, because what you don't want is a young person coming into school not in the frame of mind to learn because of whatever has gone on for them beforehand before they've come in the door in the morning. So it's ensuring that when the learning starts, our children and young people are in the right place to learn.
The one thing that always strikes me about this, and I'm not on the Education, Skills and Community Wellbeing Committee, but I do take an interest in PEF, and obviously it's of interest strategically, but I'm very loath to make any assumptions whatsoever about what makes somebody who's eligible for PEF funding is like. Now, statistically, it might be, and it probably is. What here it's saying, only 13% of PEF entitled pupils have no identified needs or barriers to learning. And this is a Lochmaben example. So in their situation, they're saying of the ones that draw the PEF funding into the school, a significant proportion will need additional support. That's identified on an individual basis. Now, I don't know what that figure is for non-PEF children, if you like, and I don't really like that phrase, but there's no, I wouldn't want to assume anything about any individual, because whatever background they come from, it's still, it would be wrong to lump everybody together just because of a badge. Do you know what I mean? So I think you're giving me a general answer for what's a specific example, if that's fair, because the small number of individuals who are on the bus from Lochmaben to Lockerbie will have their own individual stories about what they're about, and they obviously, there's maybe support needed, for example, but it'd be quite individual to each person on that, and it'll have been assessed and sort of established. So I think it's maybe just how granular does PEF get at the school level, and how much responsibility and or credit do head teachers take? Because I know there is this autonomy sort of issue between the education authority can't say to a head teacher, you're going to do that, because the head teacher's got that autonomy, quite rightly. So they take the credit and the blame as well, so that's the role of the head teacher, isn't it? So it'd be interesting to get a head teacher perspective, because I feel I'm getting an education authority perspective on that one. Thank you.
You're quite correct. The pupil equity funding is directed absolutely to schools to make those decisions for themselves, how best that money is spent. And I'm sure if you had a conversation with the head teacher in relation to that school, they would be able to give you, the rationale and the reason behind it. So I think I'll now hand over to Mrs. Woods, who will give some more examples around pupil equity funding within the schools.
Thanks. The iPad one is actually a really interesting one because with PEF funding, you can have projects that are intended for specific young people, but that can also include wider school projects. And the iPad one's a really interesting one because we discovered quite quickly that the way that young people are working now is not with a laptop and a mouse. And we found that because we've done a bit of investment through other funding streams in iPad technology, so we've got both, and we were finding that in standardized assessments, it looked like we were raising attainment, but it was because we were creating greater accessibility to some of the assessments. So I would agree with an iPad being a really helpful tool on a short journey to support dysregulated behaviour, because when young people do arrive at school, and we do have some young people that travel long distances, and they can come into school in a high state of anxiety, which then is a barrier to learning and requires support. But it's also how those iPads can then be used for those young people to increase their accessibility to the curriculum. There's been significant investment in our schools with new Promethean digital panels instead of the kind of short throw projectors. There's been a great comprehensive training offered, and iPads can operate as visualizers, and wireless technology can be used really, really effectively. And it's actually quite an exciting time on the ICT front. And anything that engages young people and makes school a place they want to come to is going to make them attend and increase their success in the curriculum. So I think it's about looking at that particular targeted support in a more holistic way, and perhaps that's what should come through in the reporting process.
And thanks very much. I think that what you've outlined there, to me, I can see what the thought process that's gone into that and the sort of application of it. I think just the way it was written, read, it was like, it kept him calm in the bus between, it was almost like a, what do you call the things you put in your mouth? pacifier, yeah. Don't know what you put in your mouth, Ian, but so yeah, so it just, you know, and I just it read, because it didn't go into that level of detail about here's the rationale behind this, at least to that extent, it just sort of read a wee bit like that. But on the Promethean boards, very appositely, I suppose, I think our political group had said, what are Promethean, because none of us were at school when these were, I think one of us, the youngest member of the group, was at school when they were introduced, but I think we're sort of keen to actually understand what a Promethean board is, how it can be used, because it's really quite transformative compared to what we're, well, I speak for most of the people around the table.
I left school with 2 A-level shoplifting and truancy.
Well, and they've probably served you better than a lot of people. But yeah, so it's maybe something that we'd welcome, maybe elected members could probably benefit from a demonstration so we actually know what's going on with the technology. Thank you.
The fact you asked for a demonstration, we'll take that back and feed that forward in terms of perhaps a member seminar on Promethean boards. Absolutely, absolutely.
No, thanks so much for that. So we'll wind up at that. We'll need feedback from yourselves in regards to this interactive way. Helps you, certainly helps us support getting to a level that we're not used to getting in. But we need feedback in regards to that. So 2 points. So 2.1 and 2.4 has been covered. 2.5 members. It's whether it's covered in item number 6 or whether it's a potential 2.5, I should say. I know it's not there. So a potential 2.5, I should say. So whether we want to put in a further recommendation that we ask for specific things, but I think probably better leaving it to item number 6, like that suggestion there, a workshop, seminar, whatever it may be. But I think we're asking for this at an area level rather than a strategic level. We want to see what's going on in Annandale and Eskdale in particular. So, a question we'd always ask, because we've done a lot of interviews recently, and it's the head teacher I'm going to ask this question. The question would normally be, if you got offered the job, would you take it? So if you got offered the chance to come back, Tara, would you come back to the area committee?
Absolutely. I'm very involved in my local community. I actually live in the town that I'm head teacher, and I attend all the Moffat District Community Council meetings, and I think it's really important to have strong relationships with how we're trying to lead things strategically, and the support and challenge which is offered by any committee is really, really helpful to help you form an opinion of what the wider community are looking for. And so I find attending MDCC really helpful, and this is just like beefed it up.
That's excellent, exactly what we wanted to hear. So you will be asked back at some point in time for sure. What was that now? Oh, right, okay. Right, so members will leave the 2.5, I think, then, for the item number 6, unless anybody's got anything burning that would wish to a particular decision to be made. We've certainly scrutinised it, evaluated, so on and so forth, in regards to 2.1 to 4. So if you can agree the recommendations outlined, thank Alison, Tara and Karen for coming. We will see you again. Well, you do get a choice. No, we know we'll definitely see you back, but it's with what head teacher. So no, thanks very much, and thanks very much, members, for the level of question and scrutiny and so on and so forth. It's much appreciated. Members, we'll just get prepared for item number 5. Give us a second. For members online, we've just got another wee minute. Just we're waiting for a member to come back. Thank you. Right, members, we'll have Councillor Thompson to find his own time to come back. Item number 5, our next report is one that we requested on the Borderlands Business Infrastructure Programme and provides specific detail on the Annan site, which is great to have before us. I'm pleased to welcome Oliver Schimmel on Teams, who's available to answer any member questions or address any members' comments. Oliver, good to see you. Very warm welcome to the Area Committee.
Thanks, Chair.
And I know you've not been prepped for this, but what I'm going to do is ask you to do a quick presentation in regards to the paper. Everybody has read it, and I'll normally read that out. They will have questions on it, but for those who have maybe not fully up to speed in regards to the Annan project in particular, I'm certainly affair with it. Annandale South members will be affair with that in particular. So if you don't mind, give us a couple of minutes, Oliver, on this particular project.
That's fine. Thank you, Chair. Just say as well, what a tough act to follow as well. I'll have to have a word with John about this from education colleagues as well, listening all about these sort of amazing and sort of proactive projects like looking after our young people. And now you've got the delights of land acquisitions to look forward to from me. So bit of a balance for you this morning, perhaps. So Annan site-wise, it's one of 3 of the borderland sites. It's as background to the site, this is the largest site that we're going to be focusing on as part of the Borderlands programme. So you're looking at just over 18 acres. One of the reasons this site was chosen in particular because of its really good location. It's got really good access to the A75. It's a prominent roadside frontage site. Obviously, it's part of the local development plan as well. So with it being as part of the local development plan as an employment site, there's a recognition that there's a willingness from the owners to see the site developed as well. That's worth bearing in mind as we go forward. So where we're currently up to with the Annan site is that we've done some very early and initial ground and site investigations. And we need to conclude those site and ground investigations to ensure that the site is physically capable and possible within the funding envelope we have to develop the site. So this site will be to develop, it's to put in the infrastructure. So it won't be building the buildings, the units for this site. It's just making ready the ground basically for the buildings to go up. And looking at valuations, we had some very early valuations done of all the sites 2-3 years back, and we've just, as it sets out in the report, we've had a new valuation done for the Annan site, which has just been hot off the press, come in basically. Just tell you why these valuations are so important. There's a few reasons. We need the most up-to-date valuation to be able to enter into negotiations with the landowner and the landowner's agent. If we go back to them and say, well, this valuation that we've been working on is 2-3 years old, they won't entertain that. They'll want to know that we've got a more up-to-date valuation for the land. We've also had it done by the district valuer, which is important because they're an independent valuation body, so it's something we can rely on. Another sort of key part about the site valuation is that, as you'll be aware, that in June time, council agreed that we would, alongside trying to do voluntary negotiation of all borderland sites, we would pursue the CPO option at the same time, because we were making a little process with acquiring the sites. So if we're to go down the CPO route, they will use that district valuer valuation of the site as a reasonable level of compensation for the owner. So we have that done and dusted now. So briefly looking at next steps, now that we've got this new valuation, we've contacted the site owner and their agent to arrange a meeting so we sort of negotiate a purchase price. As part of that, we will be needing access to get onto the site to finalise the ground and site investigations, as I mentioned earlier, just to make sure the site is wholly suitable for what we plan to do on it. We're hopeful that they will be amenable to sort of negotiating a decent price with us, and we also have, as part of that sort of district valuers report, there's an acknowledgement that if the council's to go down the CPO route, we will be required to pay quite a significant amount of money in legal costs just to pursue the CPO route. So that's something else we can factor into any negotiation of sort of final prices with the landowner and their agent. If the owner is still unwilling to negotiate us, then it's going to probably leave us with little option but to pursue the CPO route, unfortunately. But it's not the council's benefit and it's not the site owner's benefit. So I hope we can avoid that, but we do have the council decision to pursue that if needs be. So sorry, that's a quick whistle-stop tour. I hope that's of some value for the background and next steps. Thank you, Chair.
Well, thanks so much for that, Oliver. It puts the background behind it. I think the local Annandale South members, which Councillor Jimmerson's obviously left the meeting because of his declaration of interest, but we still have Councillor Brodie Marshall and myself in the meeting, but obviously it's for the wider area committee. Sorry, and we do have Lydia as well. Yep, who's a councillor for Annandale South. Members, I'm looking for questions. I can maybe start one off. So, see the site itself, Oliver. When you look at that in the face of it, you've got two parts to that site as you look in the appendix, outline in red, and right at the front of that, there's a house there. So, business and commercial, there's potential land use conflict when it comes to that. I just wondered what consideration has been taken in regards to the current residents within that house, and as far as going forward with this site as a I suppose a borderland project, and what considerations the council taken in regards to the selection, that is by the way of selection process.
Thanks, Chair. It's a good question. I think the main response to that is it's a business and industry site, and it's an agreed business and industry. If I'm putting my teeth in, business and industry site that's already been agreed in our local development plan. So to an extent, there's already an agreed acceptance that that is in an appropriate area. I think when you were to develop it out, you'd probably look towards the developing, probably as you look at the Appendix A, you can develop out the southern parts first, basically, probably with the larger buildings, and have it as far away as you can from the residential properties as you can to an extent. But it is already an agreed business and industry site, Chair.
No, thanks so much for that. No, you're absolutely right, it is. We'll give other members a chance to come in. Councillor Jimmins says, don't know what to hog it, but I've got other questions. So at 4.10, you may be touching it to an agreement. So he says, since agreement was provided by the council to pursue the compulsory purchase order for each of it talks about all the three sites, I think it's across Dumfries and Galloway, but the Annan site in particular says that the owner is amenable. If you could expand on that, please. 4.14, overhead, the first bullet point talks about overhead high voltage transmission cables requiring the planning of the site. Now, that does go to, it also talks about them, they go right across the Annan Business Park as it stands as well. There have been a hindrance in particular. I wonder to what level, this site goes ahead, to what level will they be a hindrance? And could Section 39, I think it is, of the Electricity Act 1989 be applied? If you can't answer that one, we can come back to that at a different point, Oliver. The phasing, you've probably just touched on that, I think, and that's where I was, so you've got a residential unit sitting there, you've got people living there, I think of an age, but you've got the commercial element coming around about it. So in the Annan Business Park, going back historically, the Annan South Dale members were obviously involved in that. We removed as much conflict between, we moved the access, we did a number of different things to make the conflict between residential and commercial to take that away. I just wonder through the phasing, would that be an option when you see this start to reduce the impact, especially with the age of these people that are there? See at 4.15, third bullet point, you said rent levels for pre-let units are typically set by a return on investment basis rather than a market basis. As a result of increasing build costs, it was noted that there have been examples of proposed new build projects failing due to projected market rents and values rendering and development financially unviable. Whereabouts and where? Have you got them examples? You've not got them today, Oliver. Be keen to see where they are, to actually see the evidence behind that as well. Because and the only reason I'm saying that is because I personally, I think the other members do as well, but we're constantly getting lobbied for commercial sites, and this is obviously part of the council's aspirations going forward. I'll leave it at that. No, I've got other questions, but I'll leave it at that, Oliver, because that's probably enough. If you can't get them today, happy to get them offline, but obviously all members of the area committee would receive the answers to them.
No, that's grand. Thanks, Chair. Just with that last one, you know, we're being lobbied for sort of more employment sides and more business in industry sides. That's perfectly within sort of private landowners' roles to be able to do that sort of lobbying and to approach members. But the thing is, from market reports, we're not seeing hardly any employment land come forward to be actually built. That seems to be the issue, and this is part of the reason why historically Dumfries and Galloway have got this money from Borderlands to sort of interfere, as such, if you use that word, in the market to say, look, well, we know there's a sort of pent up demand, but we're aware the private sector, for whatever reason, probably because they're not going to make the money back within the set time period that they expect to make the money back, they're just not prepared to build out these units, to buy the land and build out the units, because the return is not going to be quick enough. Having this borderland finance makes us able to sort of interrupt in the market economy to an extent to say, well, actually, we'll take the risk here, knowing that there is the demand, but we don't need to be assured of having a return over a quick period of time. That's why we're involved, I suppose. It's a good sort of intervention by the local authority. On that section 39 of the Electricity Act, if I can be cheeky, can I pause that one and come back to you on that one, just to have a look at that one, please, Chair? I'll have to get familiar with that one to be able to provide a proper response on that. And sort of on the electricity cables, you're quite right. I think what we're going to have to do is look at a buffer zone, because they're still going to have to be able to be maintained on a ad hoc or a regular basis of how much these sort of these cables are looked after over their course of their lifespan. So that will sort of guide how the space on the site can be used, because you're gonna have some form of easement, some maintenance easement over that site. So you're quite right. And when we come to the planning application side of things, we're going to be a local authority as developer. So I think we want to be as mindful as is humanely possible to the residential properties, and, you know, taking account of how we can make that development not affect the local residents as much as we possibly can, if that's through clever planting, if it's through good vegetation, if it's moving the access to the most logical place that's not going to interfere with people's lives on a day-to-day basis. I think that those options are all open to us. One of your very early questions, as we came back, was 4.10. It was about how the owners are amenable to the sale. The owners are amenable to the sale, but it has to be for the right value. The owners of, well, the agents of the owners have responded to us. So we're at that tentative point of trying to find what is a reasonable value. But if we can't find that reasonable value, then we do have to go back to CPO, and it'll be for Scottish ministers to decide what a reasonable value is. And as part of what we consider a reasonable value, we'll be putting forward the district valuer's valuation as our evidence for what's a reasonable value. So there's the opportunity to have some sort of probably negotiations with the site owners, bearing in mind that we will have higher future costs with our legal costs going forward. So there's some wriggle room, but not masses. So having council's decision to go down the CPO route is very, very useful in a situation like this. Thank you, Chair.
Excellent, thank you. Thanks very much for that, Oliver. So some stuff I'll pick up offline in regards to some of the answers you're coming back with. Councillor Thompson, Stephen.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for this sort of update. Obviously, at full council, we took the decision to enable this and provide that CPO option, understanding the timescales that might be involved and potential legal costs. I'm sure the developer or the landowner would prefer any funds to go into their coffers rather than the legal coffers in the CPO. So that flexibility I'm just sort of wondering, it's in nobody's interest really to lengthen this process, I suppose, other than if there's a game of brinksmanship or if that's just a negotiation tactic. But at what point do you, so it says in the report at 4.18, a meeting will be sought to take place before Christmas 2024. If it doesn't, at what point, I mean, where's the hardness in your armoury, as it were, to say, right, if we've not met you by then, we're initiating the CPO, then we'll get the independent evaluation, and that's it, the process is underway. Because either way, this has taken since 2020 when the first discussions were had. Obviously, there's the COVID reference in the papers. But it seems, you know, the threat of it taking potentially 18 months to do a CPO seems actually trivial now, given the length of time it's taken already. So how good are you at playing hardball, I suppose, is the question. Thank you.
Thanks for that. And I think you're quite right. 2020 is a long time to have been waiting sort of to get one of these sites. I think I've been with the council probably just over a year now, and I think the CPO has been one of the options I put forward with senior officers and brought it to councillors, which has given us a lot more power to our arming to be able to do this. I think one of our other more stronger arm tactics that the council has open to it is to use its legislative powers to gain access to the site now, because we've got a clear decision from members that we can pursue CPO, so we can actually use our legal powers to access the sites to carry out the site and ground investigations we need. So that's another sort of string to our bow as such in sort of this negotiation. So, but if we can't get a meeting in before Christmas and start the ball rolling on negotiations, I think the idea would be to follow it up with seeking to access the site using our legal powers, finish up on the site and ground investigations, which will take us a minimum of 3 months. Set this all out in obviously a letter to them with very clear timelines. And if they go beyond that, I think we'll have proved through evidence that we've sought to negotiate through voluntary means, and it has just been impossible. And this will be some of the evidence we'll use to take to Scottish ministers to say this is why we're pursuing a CPO, because the likelihood of negotiating a voluntary arrangement with the site owners and their agents, it's just not happening. So, and again, it has a cost all the time we're spent not acquiring the land. You know, building materials, they're going up, inflation, the costs are going up. So the money we have set aside is just, it will run out. It will not cover what we originally intended to do. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, thanks for that. And just to come back through the chair, so I've misread 4.19. So what you seem to be saying there is, if a mutually agreed value for the land can't be negotiated, and this is presumably when you're having the conversation in the meeting that you're seeking before Christmas, then you will instruct the ground investigations, which would then inform the CPO bid. Is that right? Is that what you're saying?
That's one of the options we have open to us, sort of the stronger options we have to be able to access the site using our legislative powers now that members have set out through the council report, that we can pursue CPO. Hopefully it won't come to that, because members, as you recall at that meeting back in June, members were incredibly keen that we did not use the CPO if voluntary negotiations could achieve what we were wanting to do. They were very keen to go down that avenue first and foremost.
Okay, thanks. So I'm just, in terms of correction of the report, it's the can and can't bit. So what you seem to be saying is, ideally, you will be able to have a negotiation and then you can arrive at a mutually agreeable value or whatever without the need for a CPO. If you can't, so I'm just sort of, I suppose what I was hoping for this was we have a way through this, and if you can negotiate, that's great. If you can't negotiate, we do this anyway.
That's what I heard, Stephen. That's exactly. I think the reading that paragraph's correct. Correct me if I'm wrong, Oliver, but the reading that paragraph's correct. But there's legislative. What Oliver's updated us today is that we've got these legislative policies, because we've agreed the CPO at the full council, or that process, I should say, that we can follow that. that the ground investigatory works can still be undertaken, but I could be wrong, but I think that's what you're saying.
Yeah, so I think for me now 4.19 is whether or not a mutually agreed value for the land can be negotiate, we will instruct. Effectively, that's you're saying we prefer the one, but if we can't get it, we can go ahead anyway with the powers that have been granted, basically.
That in essence, that's it. Hopefully, we can get agreement through negotiations with the landowner, just to say, look, first off, let us onto the site to finalise our the site and ground investigations. We know that through the district valuer, that valuation, the price for the land is given on the fact that there's no abnormals there, or no significant abnormal, so it's a gross value. So if we were to find more abnormals on that site, that would obviously affect the valuation, what we could put forward as an offer. So, but we could be quite open and honest and transparent with our negotiations with the landowner on this. And we could also share extracts from that valuation that we've had done to say, well, look, this is why we've arrived at this price. It's because there's been local sales, and this is how much they've been achieved per acre, you know, for similar sites, and that we can share some of this. You know, we're not here to make a profit as such as a local authority. We're here to get a reasonable price and reasonable compensation for the landowner. And that's the approach that members wanted to see from full council.
No, that's fine. I think I'm only really interested at this point in the mechanism. At this, until a negotiating happens, everything else is hypothetical. But it's good to know that we would be transparent and open. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I think, if I remember correctly, because Stephen, you asked quite a number of questions, that it was in private session, fair enough, in regards to the CPO. But I think we got the assurance that if the council was to, we agree in principle, we'd use this as a tool going forward. But ultimately, if that decision had to be implemented, it would go back to full council, was my understanding at the time. So again, there's a number of things I'll probably come back to Oliver offline with in regards to some of the answers that you've given there. But I would say the bulk of that's fairly accurate. Councillor Marshall's indicated that he's more than happy with the progress. I think everybody is in real terms. Everybody wants to see it coming to fruition. It's just it's through the right channels. Excellent. I don't see anybody else. No, nobody else is coming, just to be sure. Excellent. Nobody online. Oliver, thanks very much for your time. It's much appreciated, and we will be in touch. Thank you for that.
Thanks very much, Jeb. Take care, all.
Is Councillor Jimison coming back in? I think it's George. Aye, thank you. Councillor Jimison, a couple of minutes, members online. Councillor Jimison's coming in. That was a declaration of interest for him. Thanks, members, for giving that a couple of minutes, and welcome back, George, to the meeting. Final report for consideration is to seek members, item 6 I should say, is to seek members' views regarding current and future arrangements for area committees. The review of the Standing Order Subcommittee agreed to carry out a review of area committees and arrange for a member workshop and a questionnaire to elicit views, and these are summarised in the report appendices. It was also agreed that feedback from the workshops and proposed next steps will be considered by area committee, and that is the purpose of today's report. Members are asked to consider the workshop feedback, Appendix 1, and the survey, Appendix 2, and provide any additional comments on the 7 questions, I think it's 8 questions, isn't it, in 4.2.1. I'll ask first whether members have any comments and feedback summarised. We've got Liz here as well, and we'll actually go through the questions, I think, one by one, and any further comments beyond that. So we had a really good meeting at Review Standing Orders Committee. I think we've evolved a lot when it comes to this as an area committee over the last 12-15 months, and really look forward to this debate. So, Liz, I wonder what we normally do at this point. Anything you want to bring to our attention in regards to, you sure? Aye. Right, straight into it. Right, members. I was considered 2.1. I'll take questions. Members got any questions? This is an opening. Any members got any particular question in regards to the report? Then we've got a structure that we can follow, which is going through each question, 1 to 8. What we're thinking in regards to that, give that feedback to Liz. Hopefully this will be interactive. I'll look for it. Really look for it. Is Archie, was that your hand, Councillor Driver? Yep.
Thanks, Chair. It's just about the question we had earlier on, whether it be part of the recommendations in item 4 or item 6, and it's adding it into these improvements to arrangements for existing remit for area committee, and about the education, performance indicators coming back to us and getting better, not so much better information, but more information that we can digest and see if we can help the department going through that. So it would be basically on the arrangements for service planning reporting to get education, education, learning and community, thriving communities. It's just try to get you to these new titles. Would it be in that particular part that we would ask for that to be added?
Did you pick up on that conversation, Liz? Aye,
yes, I was listening, and that you're exactly right. That's where we're looking for your thoughts, and it's been helpful that you've just had a performance report this morning, so we're absolutely fresh in your mind about, is that the best way for you to get performance information about a service? Is that the best approach in the format that you can scrutinise what is happening in your particular local area? So that's exactly the kind of conversation that we're looking to have today. Thank you.
Excellent, first class. So that would be so that it's the 2.5, I suppose, as I was referring to at the time. But that would apply to any performance report coming in, really, wouldn't it? Rather than just education. Yep, aye. So I suppose that, as a general question, my thoughts going on about the level of delegation. So how far? Because come back to, you can go back. I wasn't there. But I can remember them district council days. So they were, I think, the roads authority locally, or maybe they weren't actually, maybe that was education roads, maybe sort of what was the classes? You had the 4 districts and you had the regional. I used to work for that, so what's the regional council? So the remit with it, was the delegations were far superior. So it planning, licensing, alcohol, taxes, all that stuff. That level of delegation was straight to them. They had budgets. And they've been stripped back now to the point where I personally feel, even with my small amount of, I suppose, time with them, that's stripped back to a point where they're almost irrelevant, but I feel as if they're coming back now. They need that. Maybe that might be the best way, actually, to get through the 8 questions, because there's a number of things I want to pick up on. It's really about the level of delegation, whether they should have budgets, can actually make specific decisions. I know that it references the CATs in particular when we go through that. Right, there's nobody coming in at this moment in time in regards to Stephen. Right, Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, just in the back of your, I suppose, your introductory comments just there. I think there's certain things that the path should probably follow from the community and the locality to the corporate centre, if you like. So the utility of the education report here with head teachers is that's what you don't get in the centre. You get a corporate education authority report, Whereas here we can get that actual, well, this is the local flavour of that, with the local autonomy of schools being recognised, etc. Similarly, there's something about if communities are being asked to devise community-led place plans, this is probably the best place to then take a view on that and then feed that in so that that's captured. Similarly, when it comes to the ordering and sequencing, I think it's probably better things come to area committee first, so that any corporate report has to, I suppose, reflect on the views that have come in from the localities before, rather than the sort of centralist sort of, this is the local authority view, cascade that out, that kind of top-down approach, which is kind of the opposite of what area committee should be about in a sense. So I think there's, you know, maybe that's maybe in some way aligned with what you're sort of saying, is that the role for area committee should be the consolidated voice of the locality to the corporate centre, if you like, rather than the disseminating voice of the corporate centre, if that makes sense.
No, it does, but I suppose the bit I'm going to tease out when we get to that point in time is that, okay, using local place plans as an example, if it's a local place plan for, say, Lochmaben, comes in, and why does that have to go to the centre? Oh, well, that's my point. So I thought the way you were describing it is a reference point. It comes here, but actually we'll then refer it back up to a service or corporate committee, but I think maybe it should.
So I think what I'm trying to say is we would effectively determine it here, as in we would determine whether, whatever level of delegation or decision that would allow. It's like, yeah, we think that's a fine place plan. We'd have the right officers here to speak to that and support that, presumably, but I don't, you know, and maybe the corporate report to the relevant committee might say, here's all the place plans that have been agreed by the relevant areas committees. Let's adopt all these or whatever, because we might not have the delegation to adopt as the planning authority. Do you know what I mean? If there's some kind of cuteness around that, but we could say, yeah, but that's passed the test locally, so we just want to get it rubber stamped in the centre, kind of thing. Do you know what I mean? So there'll be certain elements of delegation that we probably can't have very easily.
I think my involvement over the years, it all comes into that scheme of delegation to committees. I kind of got the scheme of delegation, responsibility officers, statutory appointments. I would say that's separate. That's something different altogether. But you've got scheme of delegation to committees. That just be amended. That just has to, because the reason I'm saying that is because it was amended the other way. Kind of we've seen the amendments, and that's what I'm saying. As we've pulled the authority and power away from area committees over the years, I've seen that, and that was through that particular scheme of delegation to committees, which then had broader effects, broader. I suppose, cause and effect, but for me, some of that needs reversed, and I think so we can, is my understanding. I suppose we'll get to that point. So if it's a local place plan at Maben, or it could be a master plan for the conservation area of Lockerbie Town Centre. I'm using Annandale North as an example here because I'm talking to yourself specifically, Stephen. Why does that have to go up to, unless there's real resource implications of some kind, but I don't see why a master plan or local plan is. But back to you, Stephen, I think it should, my preference would be for it to come to area committee and be finalised.
Yeah, so you could take the relevant determination here, but I think there still has to be a corporate oversight of what the totality of the council is doing, and I think it's maybe just how do you do both? How do you do both so that there's that corporate reporting, so anybody could strategically see here's how the council's performing with this, and recognise what each of the area committees has done in their locality to make the determinations they felt were relevant for their communities. Do you know what I mean? So that there's a kind of overarching oversight, but the decision can be still taken locally with the right level of delegation. The thing was, I don't remember the regional council because I wasn't involved by then, but what I would say, if it's permissible, is like you can never really go back because so many other things have changed. So with the whole local development plan situation wasn't in existence when you had area planning and things like that. So you'd have to unpick sort of national framework. It'd be too complicated. So you can never really go back to where you were, but you can remember it fondly. You know, and I think there is something you can, it's a kind of spiral. So you end up with it, oh, it's all centralised, oh, it's all distributed, oh, it's all, but it's always slightly different each time because other things have changed structurally. So I think, I see what you're saying, but it's not just a question of reversal. Because
I'm definitely not wanting to come back there. I wasn't on district councils either, but I remember them just because of turning up to them out of interest at the time. My age, I wasn't part of the council, but I did work for the regional council, and that's why I was an employee of them. And this is the kind of, I just want to stimulate this debate first before we got into these straightforward questions, because we've got to come back to this. And I'm not advocating that at all. I'm advocating somewhere in the middle between what area committees were when we first came in 2007, being at a personal level, and as other members here came in at a similar time, to where they are now. And let's find some kind of middle ground to where actually you turn up to a meeting like this and you feel as if you're making a decision, you're doing something. Come back to education, that education report was exceptionally good, good discussion, great talk about what decision did we make? Nothing. We didn't actually make a decision, we just spoke a lot and discussed it, and we've got a better understanding of what's going on at a local level. We never made any decisions. George?
Yeah, as a very new councillor of 2.5 years, I don't want to even know what happened in the past. But I would imagine if we made decisions here, we would have to reflect, did that have an impact wider than Dumfries and Galloway? I'll use a very specific. If there was a mothballing or a closure of a local primary school, we would like to think we got more local knowledge of this primary school, but it's going to have impact on the education budget, etc., etc. So I think we'd have to, I do agree we need to be able to make some decisions, but if there's an impact beyond Annandale and Eskdale, then that would have to be subservient or have to be passed through the wider council process, just to bring it back to simple measures. But being new to the whole situation, I've only been a councillor for 2.5 years, it's taken me a while to find out what this group does. And discussions are great, and that education one was really good because they've gone away and they're going to make it even more granular. They've taken things on board that they'll act upon, so it doesn't need to make a voted decision. The three folk there have listened to us, they've talked to us, we've discussed, and there is an outcome in that they're going to add to their information to bring us and consider what we said. But I do sympathise with the fact that some decisions are better made locally. But without repeating myself, if they have an impact elsewhere, then there's a requirement for them to go further.
No, I agree with that. That's what I meant by saying if there's any further larger resource issues, so whether that's financial, workforce or whatever it may be, then there should be then some kind of ratification at the centre, or acknowledgement of some kind, whatever that may be. Excellent. So what we'll do is just that's obviously started the conversation. Any you want to pick up on before we get into the questions, Liz?
I mean, I think your points are absolutely right. It is a decision for you as councillors at full council about how you organise your decision making. And that is, some of it you delegate to service committees if it's a strategic issue, some of it you delegate to area committees if it's a local issue. And I think what this review at the moment about is just, have we got that right? Have we reflected at the moment what your experience and your views are? And it's just that opportunity about, do you want to change anything, or are you happy with the way things are? And when we did the workshop and the survey last year, there were a number of things that came up that some members thought, you know, maybe we would want to look at that and maybe we do want to change it. So it's simply an opportunity for you to think about your own arrangements.
Excellent, thank you. So I'll go through each question. We'll listen to hear what members are saying, then I'll just come back to yourself, Liz, to reflect on that, see how you've captured that, and then we'll move on to the next one. Then we'll get to the recommendations at the end. So first question, members, open this up to everybody. But I know you've got them within the report, but do we wish to continue to receive the current style 6-month performance report plans? So the current style, I'm just going to reflect. Liz, what does it say? What were the other... I'm trying to reflect what the other area committees were thinking in regards to this. No, we haven't got that, have we? No, we haven't got that. I thought I'd seen some of that, but I suppose it's cross-referencing between the workshop and the feedback up to now for the area committees. It's picking up on that, because I felt there was a feeling that the one that bothered with that, they wanted to see the reports like that, but the one that bothered with just drilling into the performance only. And I think we've picked that up this morning, haven't we? We said, okay, it's good to pick up on the performance. Stephen? Yep.
Yeah, just whenever you're finished. But so, yes, in short, but I think the same style, I think the style is sometimes an issue. So I think we should have that kind of 6-monthly awareness of what things have been going on, but maybe if it's even a skeleton framework, or I always thought some of the fire reporting was always quite good, because you got kind of infographics like, and you got kind of easy to digest sort of top level figures that you could then ask questions about, and the officers that attended were able to answer in much more detail depending on what questions were asked. But you didn't necessarily need reams of information. So some reports, you know, I think in the past the Health and Social Care Partnership reports were sometimes quite wordy, but too historical, and then most of the discussion was usually about stuff that was happening now with the officers that were present. So there's something about, we do want the reports, but maybe that kind of headline report, if you like, without necessarily reams of papers, and then the actual officer that's attending can speak to the detail that's in our area of interest. So it's maybe just finding that balance, because there are different styles, because we're getting it from police, well, not so much police these days, but fire, health and social care, and then there's the internal reports for communities as was, and you know, economy and resources, which all different styles. So when it says, do you want the same style of reporting, what style do you mean? Because they're kind of different, but I think the summary with the officers there to answer the deeper questions probably good. Thank you.
No, thank you very much. See, when Stephen said that, I reflect on that education one because it was small and obviously it's still fresh. Some of the points you picked up on, Stephen, I think was about PSE, life learning, actually how does kind of that type of stuff. So me, there was a real interest in regards to what can we do at a local level is, now within the recommendations that were there, we could have went beyond that at the time. We thought it was better for deliberation here. What options are open for members, do you think, through the area committee, either in the future or have been historically? Because it always used to be a reference here in the recommendations here, listen, any reporting, any particular, I suppose, concerns around about poor performance or good performance can be then sent up to the relevant corporate service committee. That wasn't there this morning, that was missing for me. I didn't see that anyways. So we went through that structure. But whether it was that or whether it was actually we want a report back to see how PEF best affects, whether it's what options do you think are actually there for us? Because that came out very strongly this morning. Actually, there was a bit missing in regards to the performance reports. So we pick up on someone, not just in performance, but somewhat wider. How do we then get that, other than just asking for a report back?
So at the moment, if I can maybe take questions 1, 2 and 3 together. So at the moment, in your service committees, when you get your service plans, you agree what information is going to be reported to the area committees. So you have that determination, obviously based on officer advice, but you decide what is going to be reported to area committees. And at the moment, it's that mixture of some performance indicators, so you're measuring the numbers and the quantity, and also you're looking at some of the projects, particularly if they're focused on a particular locality. The covering report that comes to you is intended to give you some extra information and narrative, and also to give you up-to-date information, because that was always one of the challenges. Because the performance information goes to the service committee first, and then that way, if there's anything not on track, or if there's any, you're going to miss a deadline, the service committee is in control of the resources to maybe invest more to bring something back up to target. So the idea of that was so that when it comes to area committees, if something isn't on target, you're also being told, and this is what we've done to make sure that the performance improves. So that was why it was always service committee first with the performance information, and then it came to you. I think one of the things you're talking about is perhaps it would be useful for the area committee to get it first, and then you're feeding back to the service committee. You know, we think there's a concern about performance in this section. You might be exceeding performance and have a great news story to tell somebody. So you would be telling the service committee your thoughts. So it's sort of maybe flipping it over, if I've understood you correctly. There are some services which don't have any area performance indicators or projects that they're reporting at area level. Last year, social work services, for example, did not have any agreed locally reported performance data. But what they brought you was an update report just in some of the things that they were doing in your area. So that's two models. The other model, which came up at the workshop last year, was the idea of maybe doing a couple or 3 deep dives. So you would take a particular area that's of interest to your patch, and you would do really detailed analysis. You would take evidence, you would get a report on a specific issue. Now, clearly, these are being presented to you as options rather than a whole range of things that could be done, because each of them requires a certain office or resource to do it. So at the moment, we're taking your thoughts on which of these models do you think you find the most useful in terms of you scrutinising what is happening in your area by certain services.
Councillor Ryber, Archie.
And I'll just bring up what I mentioned earlier on. And it's quite, because education, learning and thriving communities is one now service committee, looking at that alternative education and qualification source from those other organisations outside of the council, which improve the chances of those young people, if it's well known or highlighted in different areas. When the education and learning come with their 6-monthly report, would it not be easier then to bring along somebody from thriving communities and say, and of course, these are some other educational things that have been granted, you know, over that period of time. I'm not just talking about cadet forces, but you've got Scouts, Brownies, Duke of Edinburgh, you know, the youth team, all that sort of kind of. And usually there are a lot of you know, qualifications which these young people actually get, which benefit their experience into hopefully some form of positive destination or work life.
No, so taking him on board and Liz, what Archie's comments here. Give me a wee example. Just so going beyond this morning's, what I'd like to see is, if I could, but obviously it's for the full council to decide through its scheme of delegations to committees, but an example at a local level, maybe stimulate thoughts for other members. So we lost 2 river bridges in Annan just over 3 years ago. That's had an impact on, I would say, the health of the community in Annan in particular. But it goes as far as Brykirk and such like. Used to be some quite clear crossover points. Even on for the sake of walking dogs and such like, you see a lot more people out in the public streets now with dogs and such like, and it's difficult. Local members have been lobbied quite heavily. Now, I think there should be a clear connection between how that progresses. As it stands, I think it's quite sparse to say the least, but how that progresses is potentially bringing forward a bridge, a new structure that will create a new pathway. So it is on our core paths, and how the involvement, how the area committees can influence that. We take that forward as a project, how we look at that, how we best affect that, then send it back to the centre as we're talking already. Whatever the service or corporate committee may be, there might be more than one because of the implications that are there. So that just one, also was one project, there could be many that we could refer to, but so let other members in. I'm just hopefully stimulating debate there and then come back and see what your thoughts are in regards to that as a pet project for myself. Councillor Thompson, Stephen.
Thanks for stimulating me, Ian. What it is was, just in terms of that though, participatory budgeting, when I first imagined it and sort of was hearing about it, I thought that's exactly what that is, because effectively there's a way of carrying a community voice through elected members to inform the capital programme, if you like, to say, this is an emergent idea from the local community in Annan, in this case. We really want a bridge or some other way of, you know, fulfilling our health and well-being and sort of connectivity or whatever. Now, there's never really been a clear route for that to happen. So maybe the roads will go, oh, we need to do the road structure there or something. Well, that's failed in inspection. But it's like, well, if you're really truly participative and you want people to be involved in something, there should be a space, and it doesn't seem to be very clear how that works at the moment, to do exactly what you've just described, which is like, well, wouldn't an area committee be able to be a good place to identify what would fall within that kind of remit, and then say, here's some emergent projects that have come from the community, and you could have some kind of test or criteria for sort of evidencing that, rather than what I think we think of as participatory budgeting, which is like, let's have some kind of fashioned event where particularly well-abled groups can sort of encourage loads of people to come along and do a vote for them, and then they get a pile of money, and it's like, isn't that really what, you know, so I think there's been issues around that, I think, which we're aware of, but I would rather see a way of localities being able to shape the capital programme. Yeah. Not all of it, obviously, but there'll be very local things that make a massive difference to a community that will not be in the mega millions that some of the corporate projects are, but clearly will have a community impact. So I would, you know, if that's on the Appendix 1, I think I was looking at, or I can't remember if I've seen it, but that type of approach I think would be worth exploring. I think that's, there's something in that, I think, which might be aligned with our general council plan and values.
Oh, excellent. That's what I'm hoping to stimulate and bring to the table. Councillor Marshall, just, you're probably listening, Sean, but I know you constantly bring up overgrowth. And another thought that's going through my head, it's similar to what the vein that's used there, is that so whether it's run by Millenfield or whether it's actually, so I'm talking locally to Annan, so there's a pathway around about Millenfield where the Millennium Bridge was, you can either walk up the footpath about a foot wide when it should be 6 feet wide because of the overgrowth and such like. Probably sections of pavement missing. You could go the same, because of this bridge, this has all been stimulated by this, the 2 bridges being gone, the extra people walking around in these, I would say, more dangerous areas. So between Northfield and Five Road Ends, there's another link road natural walkway around there. Again, there's no natural pathways. People are ending up, there's a conflict between traffic and pedestrian constantly going on, and it's how does the area committee how do they get in there, get involved and say, right, okay, for a corporate level, because we can send in an EMES, I think, which a lot of people do, we'll send in elected members inquiry and say, listen, when will this path be cut, when will this be done, but actually to say, it needs done now, it needs done within next week, and that has to happen. I think that's where I like to see the area committee evolving too. Sean, I see your mic's come off, I think, or come on, I'm not really sure. I don't know if you want to comment in regards to that, but I know you beat that drum regular. Take that as a no. Now, Sean, if you want to come in at any point, you can. His mic did go off, but we can't hear you, Sean. That's connection. Oh, you've got a connection, I say, sorry, Sean. If you want to come in at that, we'll bring in at a later point in time. So, Liz, yep.
So in your current remit, you've got the monitoring of major local projects. So you could, if you felt that you wanted to look at a particular local project, then you can ask for a report, or indeed officers might be planning to bring a report to you. And the other route is when you get the performance report, if the service committee hasn't agreed that you get update reports on a particular issue, that's something you can refer back to them and say, no, we want to get, we'd like a project in your service plan about coastal paths or about the bridges or whatever, and ask the service committee to add that in so that you then get that integrated into the performance report. But at the moment, you've got monitoring of major local projects, and indeed that's come up, for example, in Stranraer when we were talking about the waterfront. That's something that the area committee wanted to get regular reports so that they could scrutinise and monitor progress in that. So that kind of thing is already happening, but it's entirely up to you if you wanted to identify something that you wanted to see.
I think, Sean, just about good to come back in, but see, just so Wigton Area Committee, I was speaking to the chair, and it was the George Hotel, I think, is a particular project. Aye, so it's almost like a small project management office. So it wasn't the Area Committee what they're trying to establish, but through the 4 elected members there for the Ward 1, I think it is. So they're saying that let's have like a small project management office, but consisting of elected members. So the George Hotel, but whether it's George Hotel, whether it's 2 bridges, whether it's whatever it may be, it could be a project, whatever. I think that's the level of scrutiny, and I suppose could be even be seen as operational, but getting the sleeves rolled up and being able to directly held accountable to your electorate at that point.
I think, the point that you were talking about is, are you making decisions in these things? Yes, you are, by scrutinising them and saying, yep, that's satisfactory. We're happy with the progress. We've looked into it and it's agreed by us. That's a decision. It doesn't, just the fact that there's no additional action does not mean you've not made that decision by giving it a thorough examination and you're satisfied with it.
And I suppose I'll put on the opposite end of it, Sean, if you can get in now, but like say, I'll beat the drum regular and say, listen, I've asked for that to get done, it's not getting done. Overgrowth, pavements cleaned, gullies cleaned. How many times have we heard it? So, and I think this is where this debate is, and it'll probably come to a conclusion when it comes to this, but it's trying to wind it up so that what we're thinking and feeling here gets reflected back up. Sean, can you hear us yet or not? Can you come in? No, he's still got he did come in for a second. He's got to try and get a better connection elsewhere so you can hear the debate. You'll be able to come in at any point in time. So, Councillor Stephen, you wanted back in, I think, didn't you? Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. So just on the back of what you're saying there, Liz, in the current delegation, so this is about more of the emergence and provenance of the projects. So yes, we can monitor local projects and report back or say, well, we're happy with that, we're not happy with that. That's not quite the same as we have a local project that we would like to be included, and that's not the same as what's in our delegation. So it's like the strategic projects that happen in a locality, because they all have to happen somewhere, yes, we'll get monitoring reports on that, but that's not saying, well, how did they get in this strategic programme? And I think the area committees could play a role in saying, there's actually, this project should be in that. So we would be bidding into that effectively and saying, this is a priority locally. We want that weight to be given to the elected members locally, because I think sometimes we're kind of officer-led with capital projects. So sometimes you're thinking, the classic example is, why is that bit of road getting repaired before this bit of road that everybody's complaining about? You know, that sort of anecdotal report. Or why doesn't this path get prioritised because that's what everybody's using, rather than, oh, they've got some money for an active travel scheme elsewhere that nobody wanted, you know, that type of thing. So there's something about the provenance of the project and where it comes from, rather than just being able to monitor it because it happens in your locality. So I think that's a different thing from what you're saying,
Chair, and that's where, when you get the current performance report and a service plan, if there's something that you think you should be getting reports and information on, that's when that last recommendation in these covering reports is usually, do you want to feed anything back to the service committee? And that's when you would be saying, yes, we want to have locally reported active travel or coastal paths, or if there's something that you feel you should be monitoring and scrutinising but isn't in there, you're feeding that back to the service committee, which does have that strategic overview of the capital programme and other things. So there should be that, it should be an ongoing dialogue and an opportunity for you to feed that back. We very rarely get anything from area committees going back to the service committee where you're saying we want a project added in or we want an indicator added in, but it is open to you to do that.
So I certainly feel, and like I say, we've evolved over the last quite a while. In any other company business, I'll bring it up again just in the short term for us to have a discussion on the agenda going forward. Like I say, I've got a couple of thoughts myself. But I'm coming from the same side as what Stephen's not arguing from, but speaking from, is that when we're looking at performance, that's the type of stuff we look for. Actually pick up and say, well, that's the project there. I'd like a new bridge built there. I'd like the council to take recognition that the core path network, we're responsible for that. We're the authority for that. We need to make these links, and the way in which we're going to make these links is by the way of building a new bridge. It could be a project anyway, and I think that is what's missing. So we might look at the performance, but that link's no obvious. Maybe we could make it, Liz, but it's no obvious that that's what we should be doing. Yep. So, yep.
Obviously, in comparative phlegm, we've had the Cove Bridge issue, and it's you know, over the 20, 30 years, if there's been a problem with the Cove Bridge, the council has went in and sorted it, maintained it and things like that. They're now saying that the council doesn't own that bridge, but due to the amount of maintenance and things like that, they have by, you know, they do actually own it by the amount of maintenance that they've actually done on it. So that's been on the go since the same time as the two bridges in Annan, even longer than that actually, because of previous flooding issues. And it's something, you know, that the council knows about, but they don't seem to be putting any resource into finding it. So I think that would be something that we could come, you know, even if you want to deep dive into the bridges in Annandale and Eskdale, and how do you get a maintenance schedule in place for those, or how do we help local communities fundraise, you know, to get something in place for that, then that would be great. But, you know, there are things like statutory or quasi-legal committees that we set in planning, LRB, all that sort of stuff. And you get supplementary guidance for, like we mentioned earlier on about the conservation areas and things like that, where somebody in Stranraer wouldn't have a clue about what happened in Moffat, wouldn't have a clue what happened in Langham, but the area committee may say that we would like to see this as part of statutory guidance. It's not legally binding, but it's best practice and things like that. And that could be put into the LDP. But that's all I'm thinking at the moment.
No, yeah, but I think it's a good point, though, because it talked about local plans. I said that the Review Standing Orders Committee actually master plans, but the supplementary planning guidance is the same. I think you're absolutely right. We still have a version of that. It'll be explicit within a local development plan 3, I think it is. But, and for instance, I think a lot of us have argued in conservation areas that is it essential to have timber frame sash and case when your plastic version of is every bit, apart from a thermal point of view, draft proof and much higher performing. But is it such a detriment? Because from a visual impact, does it look that big that we shouldn't have it? No, I think I would support that we do, and we can. But obviously, to me, so at a local level, we can make that decision. Fantastic, as far as I'm concerned. So you're getting the thrust of it anyways, Liz, aren't you? Definitely getting the thrust of it. This will come through. So I'll move on to questions. Question 4, do the committees wish to have a programme of engagement with the communities? Additional to ongoing methods of ward events and community conversations and activities through community councils. And will members, if you want to come in as well, just give us a shout. You're welcome to come in. Councillor Driver, you're first. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I said no to this as part of the response for this, because we've already got area committees, we've already got ward events if we want ward events, you know, we've already got community councils, we've got the Annandale and Eskdale Federation of Community Councils, we've got, you know, groups who will come to us as individual councillors and say, will you support us doing certain things? First of all, I've not got the time to do any more, right? So that's a no from me. Secondly, I think, you know, if we're going to be doing extra things, it's going to be another cost to the council with mileage and T&S and all the rest of the carry on. So that's not a thing that I would like to see happening. We're doing communications, we're doing consultations with the community on the budget, we're doing community, you know, and how many consultations have the community been involved in over the last, God, 13, 14 years? It's been plenty, and participatory budgeting was one of them as well. So I don't think there's any need to increase any more meetings at an area level. If we wanted a specific area committee, we could ask for that and raise it anyway, so there isn't any issues here. So I don't think we need any more opportunities, because we've already got as much opportunities as certainly I can, you know, attend.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. So I'll open up to other members as well. My thoughts, even going back to this morning, was that we'll come to that at some point, but stuck in Annandale Town Hall. So our further community engagement is open to the public, wider public. We have done with even community councils coming along, but should we have it in Moffat, should we have it in Lockerbie, should we actually be sitting in Moffat High School this morning, taking into consideration that the subject matter that we're discussing? To me, that's a level of engagement. I'm going to look at maybe no, maybe I, let's see. But I mean, that's potentially an option that we actually have. And that one subject matter is open to wider debate within young people from the school. Again, it's a way of engaging with it. So it would be area committee. We wouldn't have any extra workload or frequency in regards to that, but we'll be going to them, the people who want to consult with and engage with, rather than them having to come to us. Just thought, Stephen, you want to come in? I think you want to. Councillor Thompson.
Thanks, Ian. So I probably would be sort of siding with Archie in this, in that I think, you know, ward events, I'm sure they will happen from time to time in some wards, but I think the uptake has been sporadic at best, let's say. And I can see the intention of them, and I think I just remember, I think one of the first ones I went to was one to do a crime in Gretna, and there was like about 13 officers there, and two members of the public turned up. I thought we've misjudged this one, you know, or we've missed the boat, you know, because there was an issue, but it maybe wasn't the way to have that conversation about it, and it just ended up looking a bit silly. So maybe we just need to be better as a council corporately at responding to local community requests, because often we're trying to, it's almost like a false construct. Oh, we'll have to create a ward event. There's a whole bureaucracy associated with that and planning, and it's like, if we just listen to the community council, they'll tell us, and if we could maybe arrange something through a kind of mainstreamed community conversation type thing. So our council approach to our community would be, right, okay, you want to have a conversation about who's planting the flower beds this season in Lochmaben. Right, we'll come out and have a word with you and see what we can do. But that, to me, that's kind of an operational, or should be a culture within that kind of service-facing staff kind of thing. Okay, we should be doing that anyway, just so we know what the relevant community is doing. But I think most of our officers kind of do that you know, at a community asset level anyway, particularly. But
The specific question is, do area committees wish to have a programme of engagement? And that's where, do we want to engage it? And ways historically we've engaged is by having public meetings. Let me think, we had about 120 people in this hall once when the plan application, we had dealt with plan at the time, plan applications, we determined them. Tesco's came in, there was 3 arts that came in at the same time. So there was one in Gretna, there was 2 sites in Annan, one was recommended for approval, Tesco's recommended for refuse. The volume of people that came in fact, it's Victoria Halls, it wasn't here. But that was a good form of public engagement, I guarantee that, that was excellent. The way that meeting went, everybody got to know what was going on locally, even started to recognise some of the democratic elected members. So I think, anyways, I think area committees, it's specific about area committees, not about getting into operational. I don't think it's about us getting into that operational level. How do we go out, whether it's ward events or otherwise? That's where my answers come from an area committee point of view. Could we adjust that? I would say by the venue in particular, we could adjust that. See, thinking this morning, do you think, so I'm going to come to Caitlin and Lydia here, ask a direct question. If we had an area committee like this, even for the single subject matter at a school, say, do you think that would have had an impact at all? Or could have changed it? People's getting a chance to view it. Caitlin, you first, then Lydia. Just even just your thoughts on it at all.
I'd definitely say it would have an impact, because it's rather than like the amount of surveys I've had to hand out and get and just filling out forms constantly. I think actually going to them and listening to young people and asking what they think, it's like a huge part of obviously the places that you represent, and I think it would definitely, they can have a conversation rather than fill out another form, another question, that kind of thing. But do you want to?
No, that's fine, Lydia. So what I'm picking up for that then, members, tell me if this is wrong. Whether it's education or whether it's potholes, whatever it may be, if we go to the location and go into them, it's from a democratic point of view in particular, would that help us engage, and would that help, I suppose, as an area committee, it's better perform? I think the education thing, if we get enough people around the table and view and get the chance to interact, I think it would. I think it would help us. If you go to the school, any school in the Fries and Galloway, ask them who the local councillor is, they wouldn't ken, but fair enough, you would understand that. But ask them then again and further, okay, who's the education authority, who's responsible for that? They wouldn't understand that either. How many times have we asked, do you know what the council is? And a general member of the public will not know what the council is for nothing else. That level of interaction and engagement would give them that wider chance to engage and understand. So when they do put their X or their 1 or their 2 or their 3 in the ballot paper, they understand exactly what the decision is, what they're making. And we would then, as a democratic decision-making body, really get a clear understanding, as Caitlin just outlined. Okay, you'd have that conversation around the table. This is what we really think. It's all right, we could fill out a questionnaire, you'll get interpret yourself, get an interpretation of that within a report, but we actually hear somebody physically talking to you, it's different and it feels better. Councillor Thompson. Stephen.
Yeah, I mean, by default, really, if you're interested in what a community thinks, you should go and listen to the community where they're doing their stuff, rather than have a thing and then expect them all to come to you, you know, so, right, but the thing is, so while I agree with that, I don't think that's what an area committee is meant to do. So there's other, yeah, well, I wouldn't really want too many of them, but the thing is, there's other ways that we can engage with our schools, you know, so we can engage directly with our head teachers, go to schools. There's maybe something in there, and even back to the PSE thing, part of the reason why people generally don't know how things work or where to go if there's an issue. They just chuck something out there and hope that somebody who can help can respond. But, you know, it's because we're not really taught very well what's our democratic structures and who do you report something to. You know, it's like, that's people don't know because they're not, why would they know? How would they know? So, and I'm thinking there's maybe opportunities in sort of how we teach civic education in schools, but that's a general thing. Area committee is not going to solve that, right? But I mean, I think this committee is more about how are we monitoring performance, you know, very much the delegations we have, but I think the engagement, I think it's a bit of a red herring for an area committee. I think we should always be able to have a way of getting voices in, but they should be arising anyway from the natural discussions within schools, within parent forums, within pupil forums, from the youth council, from youth representatives that are here. Hopefully one day they'll be asking loads of questions and we'll have to wait to get in because
when they're elected members of the area committee.
I know, but you know, but So I think we're trying our best as a delegated committee structure, but I don't think a committee should be really charged with having the responsibility for doing all the engagement in a community. So I think this is more where the decisions happen and the scrutiny happens. I don't think really we've tried a few things like ward events and that, but it doesn't really stick because it's not part of this ecosystem, if that's...
No, so they're picking up, and Lizzie's picking up. I suppose there's two arguments here, and it's about make sure that all their sides have been reflected. George, Councillor Jameson.
This won't be long enough. I'm just interested in deep dive, and I'll use this morning's discussion. You know, and I won't ramble on too much about this. You'll be glad to know, but the performance in the Dumfries and Galloway education is not good. We know that from national statistics, local statistics, and it looks like Annandale and Eskdale is poorer. So I would like to know what a deep dive means. If this area committee with, I don't know how many primary schools, with 4 secondary schools, a deep dive into that from this area's perspective, I would find really useful, because it could identify what are the differences between our schools within the area and compared with other areas, with all the variables that feed into that. Now, I think that's something useful an area committee could look at, respond to, ask the officials to bring us, speak to head teachers and teachers. That's the sort of, for me, a deep dive, if that's what we're looking at, would be very useful to this committee from these folks' perspective, our perspective as councillors, teachers, the whole, everybody involved in this community would benefit from a deep dive. What are our schools delivering for our children? How are our teachers treated? How do we attract teachers to Annandale and Eskdale? That's something I could see as being actually tangible.
I put a question mark against deep dives as well. Just ask for an explanation, so thanks for that question, George. Liz?
Certainly. So the model that had been suggested was the scrutiny reviews that are undertaken by the Audit, Risk and Scrutiny Committee. So it's you identify what it is that you want to know. You invite a range of people to come and give evidence. You may go and do site visits. You might want to do benchmarking with other areas. And then the committee comes together, reviews the evidence, analyses it, and then comes up with findings and then recommendations. So, and it takes place over months. You know, it's not a sort of a one-off report, but it's a piece of work, and members get very closely involved in that. The way in which you would identify what scrutiny reviews you would want to do, again, the approach in audit, risk and scrutiny is that political groups are asked for some thoughts, and then there's an analysis about, you know, why is it that you want to look at something, and where your area's performance is less than other areas, that would perhaps be one of the reasons that you would want to look at a particular service or part of a service. So it could be something very specific, or it could be a whole service area.
Just when we follow up on that, if we had so-called deep dive, it would, we would maybe have to think about just who we have to speak to. Yes. And I'm thinking particularly the folk that are in the schools, what is their opinion of the education they're getting, and try. One of the challenges of community councils is it doesn't always reflect the views of the wider community, because we all know that there's folk of my age more generally, and the odd one that's maybe under 60 and above 50, but it doesn't always reflect the community's views.
You don't always have full geographic coverage, no, I think, is the main issue. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just go into the Cafe Royal every day to get feedback from the punters.
Yeah, I think it's the best way, George. I remember the first time we went, and it was the DG1 committee. I don't know what to reminisce too much, but it was Councillor John Chatteris. We walked in, and it was DG, so we did a site visit in DG1, so it was under construction, obviously. And we went in, I thought, where's John? Where's John? Where's John? As we got back, he knew everything, we knew nothing. He spoke to every member, every plumber, every builder, every joiner, every plasterer, every electrician on that job where we were undertaking our guided tour, so to speak. He knew everything. He knew at that point, that was the first meeting, that it was going to fail. So he told us, and he was right. Anyway, so that was the reflection. Let's carry on with item number, I think. So we've covered question 4. If yes, what format is question 5, which the only thing I would say is what I've said already, and you've captured it, is that if we do, I know there's opposing views here, if we do, it'd just be about moving the area committee around to a specific place, if it was a specific subject matter was needing covered, whether it was education or whatever it may be. Councillor Thompson, because obviously you've got an opposing view, and that'll be captured too, Stephen.
What's my opposing view on that one?
Oh no, I thought it was. I thought you said no, we shouldn't be doing it. All right, okay, I thought we did enough.
No, I think, so it was more about the ward event type thing. So I've no issue with where an area committee happens, because it's like a church, isn't it? It's the body of the people that make it, not the building, some might say. But in terms of the deep dive, I'm just thinking there's maybe an opportunity there to go, well, if you had a deep dive in education, why not have that in a local school? Yeah. And then you're in the place where your concern might be relevant, and then you've got staff, potentially pupils, families, whoever, dependent, you know, whatever, so it makes it less intimidating, because as soon as you're in a kind of government or council building, already that's a barrier to some people. So maybe that's an opportunity to fuse the two. If so, maybe the scrutiny side is like, we're concerned about this, so we're going to have a meeting in a community building where that's relevant, so that becomes a deep dive bit, if you like. So
it mixes in, so no, I picked it up wrong, sorry. So I agree entirely with what's yourself and Archie said, but it's the engagement bit where there's a different mind, but we're in the same wavelength thing when it comes to engagement alone. Right, spot on. That's ideal. If you say we've done the format, would the committees wish to have the remit to approve community asset transfers request if possible? I would just say a simple yes to that. And, Stephen, Councillor Thompson.
Totally agree, but also I think what Liz was kind of patiently trying to explain is like, I think there's maybe a grey area where it's already in our delegations about monitoring projects that happen locally, but there's a wee nuance to that, which is where I think we were speaking about, actually, though, we should be putting forward projects to happen locally rather than monitoring projects that we know are happening locally but decided elsewhere. So there's something about, does that delegation need clarified or tweaked a bit just to say, and suggest projects to be included in the capital programme?
I mean, certainly at the moment that's a service committee that is agreeing what's in the particular capital programme, because I think that would be a strategic decision about what you're doing with money over the council area. But there is no reason why you can't, as part of your service monitoring report, your performance reports, ask for information on something that's already in the programme. But I think it would be unlikely the area committees would get the authority to suggest programme, because I would imagine, you know, the service committee membership has got representation from across the region, and that is, you know, your members on there would be suggesting what they think is appropriate for an area.
I suppose we're talking about a shift a potential shift in delegation here, Liz. That's what we're talking about. So I think we shouldn't shut that down. We should leave that door open. It probably will get shut down down at the centre.
It will come back to you in full council as part of the outcome of this review. So you'll be making the decision anyway about any changes to the delegation. But it is that getting the right balance between strategic and local. But if you think
the bit I'm really what I see from this point of view is that which you're capturing absolutely fantastically, and that's reflected back to the Review Standing Orders Committee. With this, even the different views within the room, if possible, because there may well be different views, but because I'm saying we've level. And I'm not saying I'm going to advocate for a change in delegation at even a budget level to an area committee, say for it, but I think it needs to be discussed. Yep.
Record that and add that into the report that goes forward.
No, so you're doing a really good job of defending the current delegations, I think. Right. So, but I think in terms of this discussion, I suppose we're being invited to comment on what our view is. So, and while I agree with what's suggested at 4.2.3 about amendments to delegations, so that I think there is something about exactly what. So you keep repeating and we keep repeating, but it's like it's not so much about monitoring and scrutinising. It's about a route for area committees to put forward emergent projects so that they would be included in a service plan, and then obviously would monitor them because they're happening locally anyway. So it's about that. That's where the wee gap is, I think. So you wouldn't necessarily need to have the budget, but there could be something, because there has to be a join up between the service committee, which has a delegation to receive the comments and suggestions from an area committee, for example, that would then say, we've had views from all the area committees. Wigton has said this, Stewart has said this, Eskdale said this, Annandale and Eskdale has put forward community-led path projects or bridge projects as to be given weight in any consideration for inclusion in a strategic service plan, whatever, and then that gets debated at the service. You know, and there's maybe a space for that. So I think that's kind of what I'm getting at. There has to be a route for this area committee to put something forward that isn't just monitoring. And I think, I don't know if that's on the same page.
That's exactly what I'm saying, and I think Stephen's right when he's saying you're doing it without thinking about it, you're defending the current scheme of delegation, but you not naturally do, well, you think, well, that's not what we do, this is what we do, this is a scheme of delegation, but we're like, okay, this might be altered. That's the thing. Even Standing Order 16.2, I think it was Stephen, we spoke about the review standing orders, and the question, I think, if I remember correctly, asking that was, why is the word policy there? Because a member can request a report to committee, so that could do away with all this discussion on policy. But why on policy? Why not on a project? Whether it's a capital project, whatever it may be, whether it's a section of the road getting done. I'm not using any type of example, but why are we restricting ourselves in that way? And that's what, for me, that's where this conversation's coming from. In particular, the area committees are pretty much powerless at the moment, and it's given them that opportunity at least to have that discussion. And in particular local projects, how they can deep dive, look at it, set up small working groups, whether it's an area committee level or a ward level. How can they get into that project management? Obviously what I'm talking about as an example or a mechanism, get the sleeves rolled up and say, right, let's talk about this. Like, okay, we need to allocate that budget, we're getting detail for that project, and this is how we make it work over this term. Let's get that up to the corporate centre to see if they'll agree with that. And that's, to me, that's in simple terms what we're trying to do. I'm just thinking of moving on as well, obviously, because there's a lot to capture here.
Fine, and please be assured I was not defending the existing scheme of delegation. It was more about explaining how that had come about and why that delegation is with strategic service committees rather than area committees. But happy, of course, to feed that into the review.
Stephen, yep. Quick one. So, and because this was an issue for a while, but there was a so in our delegation currently, and it had been this kind of, we could, if there was a service issue that had a budget implication, we could refer that back to the service committee, etc. But it wasn't until very recently, I think, that there was a clear governance delegation statement in service committees that they would actually receive comments from area committees. So I think that was a fairly recent, so there was a kind of two-way side to the process. So the delegation, because I remember this coming up in Rosso in the last session, in the last council session, where it was almost like there has to be, if we have that area committee, it was almost like there was nothing in the service committee delegations that actually explicitly said we will receive recommendations from area committees. So there has to, so we have to be aware that if we are recommending to somebody, wherever we recommend it to has to have space in its delegations to receive that recommendation. So it's a kind of closes the loop, if you like. So it's more just about the join up between the local and the corporate. But that's, yeah, sort of academic really, I suppose. First class, thank you. So seeing the community asset transfers, if we're agreeing yes, which I've not had any dissent in regards to that, I think you're asking that should there be a financial cap to that? If yes, are there any limitations that should be set? I'm saying financial, it could be any limitations for those recommended for approval, for example, a value limit. Should there be any limitations in regards to that, or should we allow it just to be that they have sovereignty over that? Is what a recommendation would be. I'll take it as sovereignty, and if it comes up differently, so they have full autonomy, so to speak, over that. Question 8, do area committees wish to have the remit to endorse local place plans? You've already got my view in regards to that one at the Rosso committee, and it goes beyond, and Archie touching it as well, but I went beyond that, so Liz?
Perhaps just to clarify, so the statutory basis of local place plans is that the local authority's role is to endorse them. So that is what we do. There isn't an endorsing by area committees or service committees and then somebody else agrees them or approves them. The only role of the council is that we endorse them. So at the moment it goes to Environment and Infrastructure Committee to endorse the local place plans. And what had come up at the members' workshop last year was, you know, are members and area committees better placed to endorse a local place plan rather than the strategic committee, the service committee. So that's really the basis of that. The intention of this, or what came up at the workshop last year, wasn't to introduce a two-tier system where you endorse and the service committee approves. It was to change that delegation from the service committee to yourselves.
Councillor Thompson, Stephen.
Sorry. So I think we'd just sort of agreed that anyway, because in my report it's got, for some reason, 4.2.3 is after question 5, where it's kind of saying, yeah, area committees should endorse local place plans. So I don't know if it's just the report the way it's written. So you've got the questions that we're going through, and then there's like a kind of every so often it's got like question 3, and then it's 4.2.2 community engagement, question 4, question 5, 4.2.3 amendments to delegations, area committees to endorse local place plans, and then we're down to question 8, area committees wish to endorse local place plans. So I don't know if that's just, I've misread this somehow, but we've kind of already agreed that, have we? Sorry, I'm just, maybe it's a technology thing. So
you're online, aren't you? That's maybe the difference. You're online, Stephen. So I can see 4.2.3 to delegate the current remit of the area committees is attached as per Appendix 3, but there are 2 areas which have been identified as possible enhancements, and they are outlined. And that's moving that delegation from where it is at the moment to area committees, Stephen, I think. Is that? But we'll just get that clarity in a minute. Stephen's getting a one-to-one clarity. Wee bit confusion here, but well, you probably take it as read that we'd look to see that being endorsed at the area committee. You okay with that, Stephen?
Yeah, so it's
that
just me being a dense moment.
That's okay. I get them every couple of minutes. I receive them from myself. Right. It is. I've still been told that's not the first time I've been told that, George. I'll not take any exception to that, or otherwise I'll ask for apologies or Standards Commission, not like that. Right. I think that's us getting to the end, isn't it? So we're being asked to 2.1 note, issues relating to area committees raised by members to a workshop. 2.2 provide additional feedback, which we have 4.2.1 to 4.2.3, and 2.3 note, which we've done and you've been captured. And Liz has got a 2.2, I'll relay that to the Review Standing Orders Committee. And 2.3 is to note the timetable for the development of recommendations and decisions by the ROSA Subcommittee and full council, settled in paragraph 4.3, which I think specifically it says early 25 for ROSA, but I think it's February, isn't it? Aye. The 25th of February, we're getting that as a, so 25th of February and a week or a couple of weeks later after that. No, excellent, members. So, listen, I don't think any other competent business members now, I'm in your hands, because it's went on longer as what I expected, but we've had the best of the debates. It's only 3 items, could have been finished in half an hour, but we've had the best of the debates here and discussions. Future agenda items. So you can, please, Abby, thank you.